Good evening. I would like to call to order this regular meeting of the Encinitas City Council for Wednesday, April 24th, 2024, and the time is now 6 p.m. And if the clerk would please call the roll.
Councilmember Lyons?
Here.
Councilmember Ehlers?
Here.
Councilmember Kinsey? Here. Deputy Mayor Blackwell?
Here.
Mayor Kranz?
Here.
Record will show that all members of the city council are present this evening.
It was nice of you to stall just a little bit so we can hear Kelly Yeller here. And yes. So thank you all. And I'd like to invite those who can to stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And you probably noticed there is a two-wheeler in front of me, and that is because we are here tonight to start our meeting by reading a proclamation declaring May the Bike Month. And so with that, I would like to invite up several people who are instrumental in improving the bikeability and walkability of our community, starting with Judy Burlfine. She is the chair of Bike Walk Encinitas. Kara Dolnick, principal at San Diego Academy. Janie Overland, youth outreach coordinator for the San Diego Bicycle Coalition. Christine Schindler, who is a cycling advocate and safety instructor. And Captain Shane Watts, the leader of our sheriff's department here in Encinitas. Also, Nick Buck. And Michael von Neumann, who is quite a cyclist here in town and former member of the Mobility Commission here in our city, but always raising issues about how we can improve safety for bicycling, even though he's no longer on the Mobility Commission. So I'm very proud of the work that we've done around the city. I now am the proud owner of 2 electric bikes, and I am responsible for taking my granddaughter to school at Pollocky Central every day, and we ride a cargo bike, and then we have a Magnum bikes for when my wife and I want to just go for a leisurely ride. It has become our favorite pastime. And it's because of the hard work that city staff have been doing and the focus that the council has paid on this issue for many, many years. So with that, I will start by reading the proclamation. Whereas the month of May is National Go By Bike Month, and whereas there are more than 40 miles of bikeways in Encinitas and nearly 1,800 miles of bikeways in the San Diego region, making the San Diego region one of the best places to explore local communities and go by bike to the beach, park, school, work, or local restaurants. And whereas Encinitas is home to and popular with many cycling groups, clubs, and enthusiasts, and the coastal corridor through Encinitas is one of the most traveled sections of California's coast by bicycle. And whereas Bike Month encourages new and regular riders to bike for fun, fitness, community connection, and transportation. And whereas biking is an emission-free and healthy transportation alternative for short car trips that reduces traffic congestion and is an active way to have a positive impact on climate change. And whereas the City of Encinitas promotes safe and responsible use of shared roadways, multimodal paths, and trails, and continues to expand cycling infrastructure as well as bike and e-bike rider education. And whereas the City of Encinitas supports regional and local efforts to designate a Bike Anywhere Day in the month of May for students, families, commuters, bike enthusiasts, and people new to biking to replace a car trip with a bike trip and pledge to go by bike. And whereas annually in the month of May, the City of Encinitas holds its Cyclovia Encinitas Open Street event, which encourages car-free travel, showcases safe cycling resources, and promotes access and opportunities to enjoy cycling in and around Encinitas. Now therefore, I, Tony Kranz, Mayor of the City of Encinitas, along with all City Council members, do hereby proclaim May as Bike Month in the City of Encinitas and encourage people of all ages to enjoy Encinitas on a bike in the month of May and beyond, dated this 24th day of April, 2024. Thank you. And I would like to invite Judy to say a few words on behalf of the group.
I wasn't prepared for this, but it's wonderful to be up here, having lived here for 36 years and seeing how much easier and safer it is to get around by bike. We still have a long way to go, but we've made a huge amount of progress. Thank you to you and all the City Council members.
Very good. Thank you. If you'd all like to join us for a photo?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you all. And now, oral communications. Madam
Mayor,
Clerk?
we do have 4, and just a reminder, oral communications is the time to speak to the city council on items that are not listed on tonight's agenda. You do have 3 minutes. We have 4 speakers: Philip Kokomor, Raul Villamar, Scott Campbell, and then Trina Priest.
Okay.
Whenever you're ready.
Okay, I shall start. All right. Hi, my name is Philip Kokemoer. I'm owner of 545 Ocean
Sir,
View.
could you make sure you speak into the microphone so that we can hear you?
Oh.
You
Okay.
can raise it as well.
Yeah, you
There's
could
a button
maybe
right
bring
on
it up a little bit. It's a little button on the side of it there. The whole podium.
Oh, I see.
And just hold on to it, and it should, it's kind of slow. There you go.
Very cool. All right. Is that better? Oh, yeah,
Yes.
it's better. Okay, I'll start again. My name is Philip Kokemoer. I am the owner of 545 Ocean View Avenue. I'm an engineer at Qualcomm. I'm here today to bring to your attention the issue of unintended consequences of Ordinance 3016-10B6. It limits the height of a home you can construct. It impacts homes on a crest of a hill, not on a slope, and not obstructing anybody's views. So I'm asking the city to please act on fixing this ordinance. This is a photo of my house. So the rectangle is where I wanted to fix The roof, which is not up to any engineering standard and is actually dangerous, I wanted to make it the same height as the roof over the door on the left, and I'm not allowed to do that. This is just a view to show there's no obstruction of anybody's views. All the neighbors are lower than me. I'm on the crest of the hill, east and west views. And this is on the right-hand side, it's a topographic map. You can see the area in orange is the area of the repair, and in the backyard, and the whole house is on one elevation. In the backyard, the whole slope and the greater than 10% for that ordinance, B6, is because of a steep drop in the backyard. This is the ordinance. It shows the impact if you're greater than 10% slope. You're limited 12 foot above the crown of the road. Also, this clearly indicates that this ordinance is it's supposed to help people on top of the hill not be obstructed by people down the hill. Now, what it means for me with the house on one elevation and the house at higher than the crown of the road, that 12 foot, I got 5 foot from the right of way, ground of the road to the house. There's one elevation which leaves 7 foot to build walls, which means the whole house now is limited to walls that are 7 foot. 7 foot is not even a proper one-story house. So just depending on the crown of the road elevation, you're now limiting the whole house to have very low height of walls. So I sent you all an email last night. It has the answer from the city planning. They posit that this ordinance is about views. I can assure you it is about views. There is an exception in B6 for people on the bluff, and I'm asking that you do the same for people on the crest of a hill. There used to be an ordinance B7, I'm sure you're aware of that. This is my neighbor on the left-hand side here. B7, and if you go and read in B7, it's also included in the email I sent last night. It shows that, or it says that crest of a hill not impacting anybody's view should not be impacted. So what I'm asking is that clearly these two ordinances were supposed to work together. With B7 removed, people on the crest of the hill that's not obstructing anybody's views are now impacted by B6 with those heights that are clearly make it impossible for me to build really anything. And I'll just say the only exception now is you can go and get a variance, and I'll have to go and get a variance every time I want to change something. So I feel that's unfair, and ask you to please fix B6.
And we did get your email. It was very thorough, and I read through it. And there have been other questions about this particular issue in the past. And we'll look into how it might be addressed. But it's complicated by the fact that some aspects of Proposition A impacted it.
Yes.
And that can't be changed without another vote of the people. So it's challenging. So thank you for your comments, and I appreciate your detailed email.
Yeah, thank you for reading the email. I appreciate that. Let me know if any questions.
My name is Raul Villamar. I own this barbershop, as you all know, downtown. The last time I smoked pot was in 1977, and you know how long that's been. Now I smoke pot every day. I don't go up there and smoke it. It just comes in my barbershop. My nephew in the back tells me, Uncle Raul, can you close that door? Because all we are smoking is pot. I thought the regulations said that there's no smoking pot, no smoking vaping, and no no cigarettes. I have videos and videos and videos of people just standing by the wall, smoking pot, and everything like that. I went this morning to get a drink from Honey's, and they had it roped off the front. And I'm looking at him, going like, what happened? He goes, well, we have the homeless laying there, sitting there. She gets there at work at 6 o'clock in the morning. 6 o'clock in the morning, she's kicking people out. Who is enforcing the laws? When are they going to enforce the law? We don't know. It's getting worse downtown. All I see is these blue bags, these white bags, these brown bags, and I know they're there. They park in my lot, they walk away, and I call them. If I call the sheriffs, it's going to be 20 minutes before they come. By that time, they're already back. I'm arguing with them again. If you folks are going to let them smoke, I did the alcohol beverage control meetings from 1995. I was a bouncer for 30 years. At nighttime and during the daytime, I worked my regular job. When I was there, the law said that 10 feet from the entrance to the 10 feet beyond the beyond the sidewalk, they're liable for it. I don't see anybody's security. I don't see anything going on over there. All I see is people walking around the corner. I have pictures of the homeless. They're smoking. Why are they selling pot to the homeless? They're either doing that and stuff like that. I had one customer who went home, found some gummy bears on top of the counter. It said Apple Z, Apple Crunch Z, and he had 3 of them. His wife was out of town. Next morning he wakes up because the sheriff's told the paramedics told him, well, you can either get over tonight or go to the hospital. Which one did you want to do? He stayed home. 2 days it took him to get down. Now, if I was to leave my revolver on top of the counter, am I liable if one of my grandkids comes in? I'm in trouble. Why is it that they can leave gummy bears all over the place and all the kind of stuff? You folks have to get on this thing and take care of this, please. I'm going to be here next week. I have thousands of pictures, and I'm going to download them. I already talked to this gentleman, and I'll let him have them. Thank you very much.
This isn't from the street. Okay, so. So my first ask is that the council take a look at the Sheridan stop sign. There's a lot of white paint, and it's really awkward where the stop limit line is, and coming out of there, it's causing problems for the cars on La Casa because they don't know where to stop, and it can use a little bit of work. But anyways, Encinitas Citizen Review Panel is here, and we missed the horse trading last week, but we have a request for CIP projects. But first off, let's do a little review. Going back to the ITF and the opinion survey, and there was this 1% tax increase, and there was reasons for people to not support this. And people are worried about the spending of money. We've got other things on the budget about spending money, big tax, big rate increases. We had big rate increases last week. But let's talk about positive stuff. People want infrastructure. They want storm drains, bridges, roads, sidewalks, potholes, paving local streets. They also want to keep the beaches and stuff clean. I took some screenshots from last week, and I overlaid the staff recommendations in the blue stars and the ITF in the left, on the left. There's some overlap, but there's some interesting stuff. First, I got to say this: my kids pushed their bikes up and down those stairs. They had no problems. They had no problems at all with that. It's just interesting that these pet projects were never on the list, and there was one thing on Hygeia. Interesting. So let's go to this. This is why I'm here. I request that you move up the bridge because I pulled this off today. This is falling apart. You can see the rust. This is from the center span. There's tons of pieces like this. This is falling off. If I tried, I could have gotten a huge garbage bag with just my hands without any tools. This is public infrastructure. I'm sorry, I'm away from the thing. This is public infrastructure that affects more than the city. Our neighboring communities of Carlsbad and San Marcos also travel on this highly traveled road, the bridge over the freeway. This is very important. It's on the donut list. There's 2 more meetings. I asked that the council somehow squeeze this in and maybe replace some of the other items that are unspecified. And speaking of unspecified, and I made a mess up here, so I'm sorry. There's about infrastructure and I'd like a little clarity on what on-call drainage support actually is. It's been over a decade or longer since drainage has had their budget increased, and we have inflation, but it's static. Those are my asks. That's our asks from Encinitas Citizen Review Panel. Thank you. Let me clean up here a little bit.
Good evening, Mayor Krantz and Encinitas City Council. I am Trina Priest, a middle school teacher and a mother of 3 teens. Like many others here, I have been concerned about one particular pot shop called the Cake House here in downtown Encinitas and the 3 others that are around our city. The importance of preventing the initiation of harmful drug use cannot be underestimated. Addiction is a pediatric onset disease, so preventing teens from initiating drug use during their vulnerable adolescent years gives them the best chance at fulfilling their potential. If children grow up in communities where alcohol, tobacco, and marijuana businesses are common, their perception of risk of using those drugs will be muted. So it should be no surprise that after a decade of intense study, California State PTA has created a resolution against marijuana products. California State PTA is known as one of the premier advocacy organizations in the state. They take that designation seriously and do not create resolutions unless there is a preponderance of research to support it. The resolution states in part, the tetrahydrocannabinol, the THC concentrations in current cannabis has increased substantially, along with a large increase in the diversity of cannabis products and formulations, exposing our youth to high-potency cannabis preparations, leading to increased frequency of use and increased dependency. Indeed, it should be considered an entirely different drug. Further, the resolution states that it is irrefutable that youth cannabis use generates decreased cognitive function, negative impacts on attention, memory, learning, and educational vocational attainment, increased risk of dependency and addiction, adverse effects on mental health for young people, and additionally, American Health and American Lung have disparaged chronic exposure to firsthand and secondhand cannabis smoke because it is associated with lung and heart injury and disease. We now acknowledge we are greatly behind the curve in recognizing the harm of opioid use, which for too long was considered the no-harm miracle pain drug. This would be a wise time for the City Council to consider a ballot initiative against marijuana storefronts in our city. Only pot profiteers have benefited for their existence here in Encinitas. Youth, families, teachers, and law enforcement have not. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Daniel Molitor.
Thank you. Dear City Council, I have several concerns that I wanted to make sure that the city is aware of. Firstly, I was dismayed to learn last week that the B-Cycle bike share system will soon be discontinued here in Encinitas. B-Cycle has been an outstanding resource for myself and my guests for getting around Encinitas while getting some exercise and fresh air. Being untethered to a bike after returning it makes it exceptionally convenient. It eliminates the fear of theft, as well as the need for lugging around locks and the hassle of locking them. It opens up biking to an entire segment of the population who might not have ever considered it otherwise. The disappearance of B-Cycle will eliminate countless opportunities for low-cost, healthy, climate-friendly transportation and will force many trips into car shares, in which they will contribute to congestion, noise, pollution, and greenhouse emissions. Whether this was an outcome the council helped bring about or not, I humbly ask you explore options for restoring a bike share system to our city, or better yet, seek to reinstate the B-Cycle system which has served us so well. Secondly, I'd like to highlight an especially unsafe intersection at Newcastle and Birmingham in Cardiff, behind the Seaside Market Plaza. The east-west foot crossing is frequented by many residents, including myself, when getting to and from the market, but the intersection design appears to have not considered pedestrians in the slightest, let alone their safety. The crosswalk, to the extent that it does exist, is unmarked and imperiled by both the right turn slip lane and left turners from Birmingham, who may never see pedestrians as they take the curve downhill at speed. The plaza is supposed to serve as a town center, but this intersection is making it impossible to safely get there, even for folks who live steps away. It is a tragedy waiting to happen, and I believe it is incumbent on the city to fix it before it does happen. Thirdly, I'd like to bring the attention of the City Council to the existence of several large bumps in the bike lane on 101 on the north end of San Elijo State Beach, resulting from tree roots beneath the surface. These bumps are hard to see and could easily throw a rider off their bike if they aren't expecting them. I implore the city to somehow address these while respecting our revered flora. Lastly, I want to note that the round mirror at the entrance to the Coastal Rail Trail from 101 has been damaged to the point of compromising its safety purpose and should be replaced to avoid any conflicts between trail users. And relatedly, there is a T-intersection near the Vons on Santa Fe behind the plant power where, if coming from the east, there is virtually no visibility to the left, and if coming from the south, there is no visibility to the right. This would be very well served by simply installing a round mirror on the west side to prevent collisions by enabling visibility on all sides. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you.
That concludes oral communications.
Okay, very good. Moving on to item number 6, which is a report from closed session. We didn't hold a closed session, so there is no report. Are there any changes to the agenda?
No changes to the posted agenda. And then moving to the consent calendar, no items have been removed by members of the public. However, Mayor Kranz was requesting to remove item 8E as an Edward
An H for me.
and 8H by Councilmember Ehlers.
Okay, so I would entertain a motion for items 8A, 8B, 8C, 8D, 8F, and 8G, 8G, 8I, 8J, 8K.
So moved. I'll second.
Deputy Mayor Blackwell? Motion carries unanimously. That takes us to item 8E.
8E is an echo. I pulled this item because I wanted to talk a little bit about the Station 6 situation. And my hope is that I'm going to move approval of this item and also ask that staff direction be provided to the city manager to explore a location for, an appropriate location for Station 6. At our budget workshop the other day, we had somebody come and speak on the issue. The location of Station 6 has been where it is now for quite some time, but it's always been considered tentative. And I think it's important that we have a conversation with the community and with the experts to try and identify what might be possible. I've had some conversations with Chief Gordon, and there was some discussion about the possibility of taking a piece of the park. That's, I think it's Little Oaks Park, Equestrian Park out there on Lone Jack Road. But maybe there are some complications from that conversion. So my hope is that we could get something done similar to what we did with L7 and other city properties. We hired Cosmont to kind of work through some of the issues that are related to state law and land use. And so I don't know what the opportunity might be. I know we had the contract with Cosmont that was changed a little bit, so maybe there's some opportunity there. But giving the city manager staff a direction to bring back some details about a process for identifying where Station 6 might be relocated to or stay where it is and what it would take to make a real station out of it. So that's my motion. Councilmember Lyons.
Mayor, I'd look for some clarification. I'm in favor of this item 8E as it's been presented today. I'm lean in the direction of not being in favor of adding on to it, and especially if there's some cost associated with it. And it may be just a procedural question about, would it be more appropriate to bring that discussion forward as its own item, as a council member initiated item, or whatever the proper structure is?
Well, I think that the problem with the council member initiated item is that you don't have the clarity that you need in terms of what the cost is. So council direction from here can ask the city manager to bring back cost and identify what it would take. So having a council member initiated item separate from this one doesn't really get us any further. I think the goal for me would be to give city managers same staff direction. So I'm not sure, the next item won't cost us anything. It will just be more information that's important to make an informed decision.
I'm going to look at our city managers. It won't cost any extra. I heard something about Cosmot's contract.
Well, so we do have a contract with Cosmont. I can check and see if there were some activities that we didn't need to do with regard to the Surplus Lands Act, so I'm happy to look at what might be possible. Let me just make sure I understand. You're looking for some type of engagement with the community, but also some, I'll call it real estate assistance, just to see if there's a place
Correct.
that would be a better location.
At one point, the city owned a piece of land out there. It was intended to be a fire station, but it was sold, I think, 15 years ago or so. And, so the question about where a station was going to go in Olevenheim has been hanging out for a long time. We've leased the spot on 11th Street there, but, whether that's never been intended to be permanent. So I think that just having the initial conversation about where Fire Station 6 might be located within the Olevenheim community is what I'd like to see kick off, and what shape that
I'm
takes.
sure our city engineer and our fire chief would be delighted to look into if there's something available in that area for a fire
So
station.
the point of this action right now is to just kick that off without having to come back on a councilmember initiated item. Councilmember Raylers.
Yeah, so let me be clear on what the motion is. It sounds like it's a two-part motion. One, approve 8E as it is, which is to close the emergency. And then number two is to agendize in a future agenda the discussion of what are some of the framework around or decisions that would have to be made in order to.
Yep.
Yeah, okay, I can support that. Did you get a second yet?
Nope.
Okay, and I just want to make sure that's okay it's within the purview of the item in front of us, so we can make that. I was looking to the city attorney, just to make sure we're not doing anything that is outside the notice.
That is correct.
Okay, great. So I'll second that, and I welcome the opportunity to look at, because and the other thing, I think the only thing you didn't talk about was when they sold off that land, it was under the assumption that the Carlsbad, that the gate in the back end of Liebenhain was close enough to the Carlsbad, but then Carlsbad went and moved their station out further. So it's been a long story, and it'd be great to have that as an agenda item. So thank you.
Okay.
And Mayor, I just want to be clear, so it's direction to the city manager to bring back information on steps and costs on how to move forward with locating an appropriate location for Station 6.
That's what I intend, yes.
Motion carries unanimously. That takes us to item 8H.
Okay. Do you need a report?
Sorry, I don't need a report. We went through the discussion, it was the last meeting about, and there were a couple of things that stuck out to me. Number one, I wanted to make sure the work plan included going back and identifying new sculptures for the locations we have. But I thought there were a couple other areas that I wanted to see if that are associated with that discussion, that I wanted to see if the rest of the council was interested. I really like the fact we did the public outreach and got the rating system. What I'd like to see is that, number one, that the art jurying criteria, it wasn't in our staff report, and I want to make sure that's clearly defined, and that that the commission selects what that criteria is. So I'd like to see that on the work plan. There was some discussion during last week's meeting of establishing some type of threshold, maybe, because just like I used the analogy last week of Amazon, I think that we're talking about public money, and therefore I think the public does have input into what they like and what they don't like. So I don't think we should be forcing on neighborhoods anything that the majority don't like, the vast majority especially. So those are, and what I would say is our direction back to the Arts Commission would be more general and say, hey, we would like to see a more formal methodology for jurying with clear criteria established by the commission, and then a rating with possibly a rating threshold if the commission agrees, and come back. I'd like that recommendation to come back to us, and so that we don't go through what we went through last time.
I don't see anything I object to in these modifications. Does Commissioner have any comments?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Okay. So.
Then I'd move approval.
Move
Unless there
approval
are
with those
comments.
edits?
With those edits, yeah.
Yep. Okay, second.
Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, thank you. Moving on, we are now on item 10A, which is a public hearing to consider public hearing and introduction of ordinance number 2024-05, setting Cardiff Sanitary Division sewer service rates, and ordinance number 2024-06, setting Encinitas Sanitary Division sewer service rates. And Senior Management Analyst Elmore is going to be presenting. This is a public hearing, so let me go through the procedures. We will get a staff report. Then I will ask council to disclose any other information they've received that is not included in the staff report. We will follow that with preliminary questions if we have any. Then we will open the public hearing and hear from the public if they have comments to add. Once we've heard from the public, we will close the public hearing and have council discussion and action. So with that, we're ready to begin.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Jared Elmore, Senior Management Analyst with the Utilities Department. When we last addressed sewer service rates on February 28th, Council directed staff to schedule a Prop 218 public hearing, and to mail Prop 218 notices to ratepayers of the Cardiff Sanitary Division and the Encinitas Sanitary Division detailing proposed sewer rates. Staff has done these two things as Council directed. Cynthia Peraza with Ardura, the city's sewer rate consultant, is here with us this evening. She and I are going to tag team this presentation. We'll be taking turns, and we're glad to take any questions after the presentation. We've kept it short because you've seen most of this already, but we've included the salient points. Tonight, staff recommends that the City Council conduct a public hearing, receive public input, including protest votes, and introduce two sewer rate ordinances, one for CSD and one for ESD, which are labeled Attachment 1 and 2, respectively, on the agenda report. Now I'll hand you over to Cynthia to present the next few slides about costs and rates, and then I'll return to guide you through the rest of the process.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Mayor, council members.
Put your mic on.
Staff. Am I on? Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, council members, staff, and members of the public. My name is Cynthia Peraza. I'm here representing Ardura. As Jared mentioned, council has considered this matter over the last several months, and so tonight's presentation is very concise and is intended to include some specific items in regards to the recommendations of the rate adjustments. We'll be talking about both Cardiff Sanitation District as well as the Encinitas Sanitation District. So each of the districts is legally required to generate enough revenue to fund the programs that are required to efficiently and effectively maintain the collection system. Those costs go to the four primary components which make up the programs. One is to operate and maintain the collection system. Another is to fund the costs for treatment of the sewer flows generated within each of the respective systems. Then the capital improvements that need to occur in the system, and this includes both the specific collection system itself, but also the fair share of the improvements required at the treatment plants. And then the fourth is to be able to generate enough funds, revenue to fund the reserves and achieve the targeted amount there. The sources of revenue for each of the districts include the following. One is the billings. Those are made up of two components. One is a fixed fee based on the associated meter that is tied to each of the properties. And then the second is based on the flow that is generated at those properties. The second revenue source are capacity fees. Generally, these are associated with new developments, and there are fees to connect to the respective collection system. And then there's the interest that's earned on the reserves of each of the respective system. So in preparing the rate analysis, and the goals really include the following. As we mentioned, the components of the programs, we need to assure that the funds match the cost of maintaining and operating the system, that we're able to meet the reserve funds, the targeted reserve funds, that we're continually addressing the ongoing aging of each of the collection systems. And really, it's intended to align the needed revenues, again, per system with the planned expenditures for each of the systems. So this graph illustrates what's going on with Cardiff specifically, and what the recommended adjustments are intended to do. So as you can see in the first column, we're currently expending more funds than revenue is being generated. What that means is that we're having to draw down on the reserves. With the proposed adjustments, it's not until year 4 that we're seeing that there is now a replenishment of the reserves and not yet meeting the target. It's not until year 5 that we meet the targeted reserves and we're generating more revenue than the expenditures that are occurring or that are planned to occur. Similarly with the Encinitas Sanitation District, currently we're spending more money than the revenues that are being more revenue that's being collected. Similarly, we're having to dip into the reserve funds. In this particular case, it's not until year 5 that we're even starting to touch on replenishing the reserves, and not until year 5 that we're actually generating more revenue than the expenses being incurred. So for Cardiff, the proposed increases are 15% for the first 4 years, up to 15% for the first 4 years, and 10%, up to 10% for the 5th year. It should be noted that on a yearly basis, staff will prepare an annual report that summarizes the revenues earned and the expenditures, and report to council. And at that time, council will have the opportunity to visit those rates and reassess. For Encinitas, the proposed rate adjustments are up to 19% for all 5 years. Similarly, on a yearly basis, an annual report will be generated by staff, presented to council, a summary of revenue versus expenditures. And again, at that point, council will have the opportunity to revisit those rates. So this chart shows essentially a snapshot of the planned adjustments for both Cardiff and Encinitas in relation to the neighboring agencies. As you can see, Encinitas and Cardiff both will still be on the lower end of those rates. And with that, I will turn it back over to you, Jared.
So as we discussed previously, and I'll revisit here, there is a part of the Prop 218 process that allows for a protest vote. And the law requires that 50% plus 1 of the affected property owners in each respective district protest or indicate to you they are not in favor of the rates. in writing formally, and that at that point, that would effectively stop any proposed rate increase from going forward. For CSD, there were 6,559 notices mailed. 3,280 valid written protests would be the threshold. And at the beginning of this hearing, forgive me, we received some as I walked through the door, so that slide's not accurate. We had 7 from CSD. In ESD, we had 4,128 notices mailed, so your threshold there is 2,065. And again, we have an update. It's not 23, it's 26 protests that I had received as of the beginning of this hearing. So that gives you a sense of where you are. And I can answer questions about that later if you have more. But at this point, reviewing our recommended action, we've opened the public hearing. It is now up to council to receive the public comment and close the public hearing, and then review and count any written protests received during the public hearing. Our clerk will have an update for you if there have been any protests have been received since we began the hearing. So you'll have a final tally, and then it will be up to you to introduce the 2 ordinances to reflect the sewer rates that you've proposed for the respective sanitary divisions.
Okay, thank you. Before we open the public hearing, I will ask council to disclose any other information you have received that is not included in the staff report.
I have nothing to disclose.
Nothing to disclose.
Nothing to disclose.
Nothing to disclose.
And I have nothing to disclose. Are there any preliminary questions? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, please invite the speakers.
Public hearing is opened.
Oh, yes. Consider it open.
All right. First 3 speakers, Jeff Miller, Sarah, John Johnson, and then Scott Campbell.
I'd like to discuss 3 items related to this. Thank you for your presentation. It was quite clear. Thank you for the presentation. It was quite clear. Background, my name is Jeff Miller. I'm a mechanical engineer by education and training. My first professional experience was an internship with the Environmental Protection Agency Wastewater Division. I'm a 35-year resident of North County, a 7-year homeowner in Encinitas. I live in Pacific Serena on Coneflower Street. It's a 9-block community. It's a 50s-style sitcom neighborhood. We know each other. We take care of each other. We share glasses of wine. Our dogs play together as well as our children. It's idyllic. I bring this up because it leads me to item 1, and that is communication. I'm sorry, I don't know if we can communicate better, but I personally didn't receive this. I asked my wife, and it's possible that it inadvertently got thrown away. It's unlikely, though, because we're very much on top of these kind of things. I found out about this from a neighbor. As soon as I found out about it, I went through the neighborhood and I talked to other neighbors, at least 14 households, and most of those, if not more, have sent letters of protest, and I get texts all the time, including today. So please, we need to do a better job of that. I know that, just so people understand, this is 15 or 19% year on year, so we're going to be back here next year, correct? The other thing is that is disturbing to a lot of us is we've been in the Planning Commission meetings when we've been discussing the developments that are happening on Westlake and Encinitas Boulevard. Roughly 871 units, Sunshine Gardens, Quail Meadows, Moonlight Apartments. And during that time, there were always questions. First, the staff presented, not you guys, but first the staff presented that the infrastructure was sufficient to handle those. We questioned that again and again. Infrastructure meaning not only wastewater sewer, but power grid, traffic, all of these things. And time and again, they assured us against what common people would think, that it was sufficient. There was no mention that there was an infrastructure problem with this. So that leads a concern not necessarily with them and not necessarily with the staff, but somewhere in between, because if they were wrong about that, are they also wrong about the power grid? Are they also wrong about traffic? We're very concerned about that. And then there's the elephant in the room, and that is that we're in a time of really big inflation. The timing here is really bad. I'm sorry, we're all struggling. A reminder that when they quote the numbers of inflation, they don't include fuel or food. And really, that's a big impact. I look for you to find innovative ways to get us a really good infrastructure in wastewater, rather than putting this on the taxpayer at a 20% increase. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm pretty sure you said my name next, Sarah Torito? Yeah? There was no last name, right. My name is Sarah Torito. I'm a Cardiff resident. I've lived in North County for a long time. And this is the second time a water issue has come up that I've come to a meeting. And the first time that it's dawned on me that the notification that's being given isn't really notification. Because I was going to go around after seeing this proposal and doing the math to people and get the written signatures, but I wasn't aware that I needed to be prepared that way tonight. So if anything, if you guys could hold off on a vote or whatever it is you want to do, move forward after you hear the numbers that I've been able to calculate, because I have the time. I'm lucky that way. I don't have to work full time. So I did these numbers. And it sounds like not much. 15% is what they said in the proposal, not 19%. That's the first time I've heard of that tonight, and I did those numbers too. So, based on that 15%, which is kind of deceptive too, because if you look at it closely, it's not 15% over all those years. At the end of the year, I think it's 4 or 2 or something stupid. I'm sorry, but it was really deceptive. So it would more than double the current bills as laid out at 15% per year over 5 years, which would be over $200 for a $100 bill today. In 5 years, it would be $201.14. But when I read more closely, I realized that teetering of deception, which would mean that that $100 bill today would then be $192.39 after 5 years. But now that I've heard from these guys that it's going to be up to 19%, that would be $253.52 that I had to scribble down and do my math tonight, which really is sketchy. So starting at year 1, we have $100. By year 2, it's $115. By year 3, it's $132.25. By year 4, so on and so on and so forth. Then again, add 19% into that, and you've got $253 for any family. But struggling families definitely are going to feel that, whether they own or rent. That is going to come out of our pockets. So please table this issue while I can go get more signatures that will say, this is not the way to go. We do want infrastructure. We want to fund this, but not this fast. It's too much of our money coming into the city's pockets too fast. And it's deceptive, and the way it was leveled out to us was not clear. So I ask you to wait on this vote so that I can get some more signatures for those numbers to work. Thank you.
Okay, good evening, council. My name is Scott Campbell. I live in Encinitas District 1. And I'm not in Cardiff Sanitation. I'm not in Encinitas Sanitation. I'm in Leucadia Wastewater District. I'm sure we're going to have the same problems. But on top of that, I'm on septic tank. So this really isn't a personal issue for me. This affects a lot of people. Now, the first two speakers talked about public outreach. This has been a big topic all year across the board on all of the commissions, on all the things. I don't have an answer. I usually have suggestions. I wish I could have a better answer. The city is trying very hard, but public outreach is clearly not the issue. Now, that last speaker talked about it. We're talking about a 92% for Cardiff and 138%. When was the last time the rates were raised? I think it's been 10 plus years. This is election year. Is this a record that you want to run on as raising the rates on sanitation? You got the rates going up when the water comes in. You got the rates going on when the water goes out. You want to raise the taxes on everything we buy. The county wants to raise taxes. Like I said, the optics are tough right now, and I get it. The city needs money. We're gonna fund this. It's it's gonna happen, but we need to be more proactive. We need to take account of inflation. We took advantage of easy money for a long time. If you looked at the sales tax receipts for Q3 last year, or Q4, down 12.7% from the year before. That means we have less money coming in. And we're spending more money. We're asking more from our citizens. What are we going to spend our money? And we need to choose wisely. Thank you.
John Johnson?
Good evening. I'm John Johnson, long-term citizen, been in Encinitas for 25 years. I moved to this area because it was affordable. It was a safe place, good schools, and in that time, things have changed, not all for the better. And in also that time, the cost of to live here has just steadily increased. Now we're talking about sewer. A couple months ago it was water. Now it's electrical. Everything is just steadily going up and making it cost prohibitive. For families moving into my neighborhood, just the property tax alone is ungodly. I pay $17,000 a year in property taxes, some of which is because of the city council and the bond that they passed at IRCA, which I was not very pleased about. And there are people, new homeowners are coming in with a property tax of $34,000. Now you want to raise this sewer tax for God knows what reason. In the private sector, there's this thing called fiscal responsibility. In a tough market, you look at administrative costs. How much are you paying your employees? How many employees that you have? How many are necessary? You tighten the bootstraps. I can't call my client when things are not going well and say, hey, guess what? I'm going to raise your cost to do business with me 19% every year for the next 5 years. What I'll have is my client walking out. And in this case, you're asking almost for 100% increase in the next 5 years. So by 2030, are you actually advocating that the rates are going to go down, or are they going to steadily go up? Because there's no plan for it after 2029. Now, also, I want to mention, like I said before, the notification process is poor. Most people thought this was junk mail. And I guarantee you that everyone here and those that have protested, you have over 50% of people protesting. These are your constituents, the people that vote for you. If this notification was done better, you'd probably see about 60 to 70%. But most people threw it away because they didn't know what it was. It was only my wife, thank you, honey, for letting me know what this was. And everyone that I talked to in Encinitas Ranch and a series of other people, none of them knew about this. Only 4,000 notifications in a city this big. And I dare to say that it's probably even as much as 70 in these tough times where people, and I also, even though I'm not a senior citizen, there are many in this area that live on fixed incomes. Are you going to advocate that they're going to have an increased cost of living? Those are also your voters. And the last thing I want to make sure of is that we look at the future of how we handle things. Have some fiscal responsibility like we do in the private sector, rather than putting the burden on the taxpayers, which are already overburdened right now. Thank you for giving me the time.
Great job.
That concludes speakers. Then we did have John Clausen and Mike Metzger, who registered opposition but did not wish to speak.
Okay, thank you. These are rates that we're setting for use of the sewer pipes. The pipes are in need of maintenance, and that's why this is a capital improvement program. And raising the capital for making those improvements is critically necessary. And so that's how we ended up where we are today. Nobody likes an increase in the cost of living in this city, but the alternative of having pipes that fail is really bad, really bad. And so it's expensive, and it fouls the environment significantly. So that's why we find ourselves in this position. Councilmember Ehlers.
Could you bring up the charts that show the reserve, the red and green chart? I think there are a couple of explanations needed. So first, I want to understand what happens beyond. And this shows the years where we actually have actual increases. And I'll point at the last year, fiscal year 28-29. You can see that the sources of funds, so the revenue exceeds the expenses. And the presumption I have is that we won't have any increases for probably a few years as the expenses grow and probably the source of funds stays flatter, kind of like we had in the previous years prior to this year. Fair enough. Is there a projection that goes out further?
There is not, and generally, we do not go beyond 5 years. As we previously mentioned, this is intended to be evaluated every year when staff reports the earnings generated based on the recommendations, implemented recommendations, and with the documented expenditures. And so each year, you'll have the opportunity for each of the districts to evaluate that. But generally, we do not go beyond 5 years.
Okay.
It's just hard to predict.
And so the other thing included in this, the first year we're setting, the second, third, fourth, and fifth year are up to and don't have to be at the 15 or 19, depending on which
correct.
district. So I think there was some misunderstanding that there are actually two different districts. The Cardiff Sanitation is getting
That
the
is correct.
15%, and the Encinitas is getting the 19%.
That is
And
correct. So
if you
just
have that,
to clarify, for Cardiff, the recommended increase is up to maximum 15% for the first 4 years and 10% for the fifth year.
So-
But
so-
each year, you have the opportunity to revisit it.
So if we take the compounding of the Cardiff Sanitation District at 15, and if in future years we say 15, 15, 15,
Compounded.
15, I agree that it would be 2.01, it'd be a 100% increase, and I agree with that. But each year, we will be deciding whether or not that revenue versus expense chart and the reserves, which are now negative, or will be negative, are going to go as deep as what is predicted right now, or whether the economics and the cost of running the system.
That is correct.
So the next thing I would point out, and I think the mayor, I'm going to reiterate what the mayor said, that this is an enterprise. In other words, we can't take money from the city. City revenue cannot be paid into the Cardiff Sanitation or the Encinitas. They are separate entities financially. And so, and by law, the revenues have to meet the expenses. And that's what's happening here today, is we're looking at because the expenses have gone up so severely in the last few years with inflation, with the cost of asphalt going up, with the cost of chemical treatment going up, we are almost forced into doing this. So the last thing I would go to is, I said, with Councilman Lyons on the Encina wastewater, which is where the Encinitas wastewater goes. We have other people that sit on the San Elijo JPA, which is where the Cardiff Sanitation District outfall goes. And we did a study earlier this year looking at how expensive is Encina to operate and what kind of, where do they fit relative to their peer group out there. And it was compared to hundreds of other sanitation districts. And what I'm talking about now is the plant, not the pipes. And we were in the top 25% in efficiency in almost every category, which is good. That says that Encina, in that case, was running more efficiently than 75% or more of the other similar type of plants. And that's part of this cost comes back in paying to Encina. And then, as the mayor correctly pointed out, of course, there are pipes. And it just so happens that right now, our city, the majority of our pipes are at that 50-year age. They're getting 50 and 60 years old, some even older, and that's where they're requiring maintenance. So I'm not surprised by this. It's unfortunate, but it is a closed system that we can't take money from the Encinitas tax rolls. This is sewer rates. It's collected on the tax bill, but it's sewer rates, and they're separate. So I thought that was an important clarification. So with that, I don't see, with the level of protest being so small compared to the number of the surveys, I understand. Yeah.
You've had your chance.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Councilmember Lyons?
I'll second the motion.
Councilmember Ehlers said several of the things I was going to say. We're living in an environment right now where the costs of construction are really high. And I see our fiduciary responsibility as One, to make sure we have the resources to keep the system working well. And the fact that we're not going to be able to meet our reserves until a 5-year period again is where I believe our fiduciary responsibility needs to focus. If we don't provide enough resources to keep the infrastructure working, then we're at risk of a system failing. And we absolutely cannot make a decision that would put us at risk like that. So I just wanted to reinforce that. Across the board, it's really painful right now, and I understand. We all live in this community, and we all know what the costs are. I've been doing a deep dive, and I think many people have, into why are things more expensive now? And one of the things that I'm finding, because I am in a construction industry in my profession, is that construction costs are coming in at a minimum 30% higher than they were just a year or so ago. And, people will say, well, why is that? It's supply chain issues, it's materials issues, it's the cost of things down the chain of how they change hands before you bring that pipe and you get that pipe fixed. We've been putting our heads together across many, many agencies to try to figure out how can we manage that and still make sure we see for the needs of the people without sacrificing the services that we're tasked with making sure we have here in the city, and it's not good news. I'm sorry, and we are trying our best. I'll yield the floor.
Thank you, Councilmember Hensy.
Thank you. I was wondering if staff could address the concern that Mr. Miller brought up, that there's a perception from some in the community that the current ratepayers would be subsidizing future development with these rate increases.
Thank you for your question, Councilmember. The presentation briefly touched on the two different components of revenue that we receive directly from the ratepayers. The fixed charge and the flow-based charge, that's all they're paying for, and that pays for system operation, treatment, maintenance, that sort of thing. System expansion relies upon capacity or connection fees, which will be coming before you on the 8th. That is a separate revenue stream and is used for build out of the system to capacity per the sewer master plan. So it is our intent, and it is the nature of the rates that are before you today, to use current revenue for operations, maintenance, and treatment type activities, and the capacity or connection fees for the system build out. That's two different things, and thank you for the opportunity to clarify that.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that. I think that's important, and I understand how that perception is made, even if that's not what is actually going on. And I too just want to acknowledge that these rates are definitely a shock to the system, and when we saw them, I think we were all kind of blown away. We all serve on different agencies that provide public utilities, and these are some of the highest, I think, but in most of the agencies where we serve, we are seeing increases in the double digits due to all the reasons that my colleagues acknowledged. This is not a fun vote for us to have to take. These are difficult headlines to see. It's hard to know the burden that this is putting on small businesses and the residents of our city. But not taking this vote and not increasing the rates at this magnitude over the next 5 years, I think would be really irresponsible for us to do. In prior meetings when we had these rate study presentations, it was really clear to me that if we're not making these investments, we'd be really negligent on behalf of those that we represent. So aside from public safety, I would argue that maintaining an efficient and reliable system for our residents is our most important responsibility. So that's why I'll be supporting the rate increase. And I also do want to acknowledge two facts. And one is that it's been so long since we had these rates come before us, and that's why they're so large. And we've asked our staff to come back more frequently so that we can do this more incrementally and stay more in touch with the increase in costs that we're seeing. And the other thing is that one of the speakers brought up this concept of fiscal responsibility. And when you look at our rates compared to those of our surrounding jurisdictions, we are still on the lower half. And so that signals to us that we are being fiscally responsible and that we are adhering to the goals that we have to not overspend. So that concludes my comments. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Blackwell.
Yes, thank you. First, I have a question for staff, and that is, we had several of the public comment talk about the notice process, right? And maybe not receiving it, not understanding it, thinking it was junk mail. Could you just speak to the notice process, please?
Thank you for your question, council member. Yes, we have a detailed roll of all of the properties that are connected to our sewer system. That roll is used for billing purposes at the appropriate time each year, and that's the list that we use to send out notices. So everybody who lives in the ESD or CS, or pardon me, the property owners of residences in the ESD and CSD areas receive notice by mail. That notice was a trifold, two-sided notice that included not only the percentage increases, but the nominal charge, the dollar amount that the average household would probably pay for standard, typical usage over the 5-year period that you're entertaining rates for. So it was, the baseline is compliance with the law, and it met that and exceeded. I also put my personal phone number on there, my desk phone, and received about a dozen calls in the interim between distribution and this evening, and was happy to walk people through the process and the details and all of that. So we attempted to make ourselves available, and we're open to any suggestions on how to change that process moving forward. We really do genuinely want input from the community on how they would like us to contact them. But what you have before you this evening is in compliance with the requirements for this process.
Great, thank you. And good feedback for you to hear from the public about perhaps it doesn't stand out enough in the regular mail, right?
Thank you.
I too will be supporting this, but with heavy heart. I think it's unfortunate we have to raise the rates. Councilmember Hinsey did talk about many of the reasons I would touch on, so I won't go through those extensively. But I did look back, and it was 2013 that we raised the rates for ESD and 2019 for CSD. So we are behind. I do really appreciate that we can look at these annually, that we can look at them as a maximum, and that we don't have to raise them up to the maximum, and that we are still relatively low against those other cities. But I do feel like we have to stay on top of this so we don't have problems with our wastewater pipes. And again, just making sure we are also fiscally responsible. So appreciate the public's comments, and it's not an easy vote.
No, it isn't. And to follow up on the question about notification, I do think that there are some other ways that we might reach out to notify. Maybe there should be emails that get sent. That's a very cost-effective way. And definitely people have shifted from, going to the mailbox and looking through each piece of mail to much more electronic. The other alternative would be possibly making phone calls that kind of a robocall that says, hey, we're doing this, you should pay attention to your mail, or you can contact us at this number. But we hopefully won't have this need a 218 again soon, but if I'm around, I'm going to be bringing that up during the original process before we authorize the 218. To Scott, I would say I sometimes am a little embarrassed about how bad I am at politics, because a good mayor would have kicked this can down the road until after November, right? But no, you know what? We're going to deal with it because it's a responsible, fiscally prudent thing to do. It's better for the environment, and it's important that we do this. And I'm sorry that it impacts the seniors and some people on fixed incomes, and it's not a small sum. I get it. But in the meantime, it has to be done. So with that, I think we have a motion and a second. So with that, we will vote.
Would you like to close the public hearing?
Oh, close the public hearing. Hearing is closed. I didn't do that in the proper order.
It's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, it's okay. Let's not. Hold on. There we go. Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. Isam and your team, appreciate it. With that, we will move on to item 10B, which is a public hearing to consider and approve Resolution 2024-35, approving the fiscal year 2024-25 annual action plan for the Community Development Block Grant Program. And we have Housing Management Analyst Schubert here. And we are again in a public hearing, so we're going to hear a staff report. We're going to ask council to disclose any other information they have received that is not included in the staff report. We're going to ask preliminary questions. I'm going to open the public hearing and close the public hearing in appropriate order, and then we will have discussion and action.
Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and City Council members. The item before you tonight is the continued public hearing for the fiscal year 2024-25 Community Development Block Grant Program, Annual Action Plan, and Budget. To summarize the March 20th meeting, Council approved estimated funding recommendations and authorized an estimated general fund subsidy. 2 public comments were received. Approved funding was incorporated in the draft 2024-25 Annual Action Plan. The Annual Action Plan is a requirement for CDBG funding, and it describes how each project and activity meets a national objective and a consolidated plan need, and describes the outreach and citizen participation efforts. The public review and comment period was from March 21st through April 22nd. The public was notified of the review and comment period through various sources, such as the Coast News, the city's website, and the weekly city newsletter. Copies were made available at City Hall, the Community and Senior Center, and the libraries. No comments were received. The fiscal year 2024 CDBG estimated award for the city of Encinitas is approximately $297,000, with an estimated $350 in general fund subsidy allocated over 3 categories. An estimated total of approximately $45,000 is allocated to 3 public service agencies. Approximately $59,000 is allocated to planning and administration, which includes fair housing, and approximately $193,000 is allocated for residential rehabilitation. To date, we have not been advised by our HUD representative when we will be notified of our grant allocation. If the fiscal year 2024-25 grant is more or less than the estimate, adjustments will be made to reflect a proration over the approved public service activities at 15% and administrative activities at 20% of grant funding to comply with the CDBG program funding limits. To conclude, staff recommends that City Council adopt Resolution Number 2024-35, authorize the city manager or designee to transmit the fiscal year 2024-25 Annual Action Plan and execute required certifications to HUD, and authorize the city manager or designee to execute all funding agreements and documents consistent with the fiscal year 2024-25 Annual Action Plan. This concludes the presentation. I'm available for questions.
Okay, thank you. If the council could now disclose any information you received that is not included in the staff report.
I have nothing to disclose.
Nothing to disclose.
Nothing to disclose.
Nothing to disclose.
And I have nothing to disclose. Are there any preliminary questions? Hearing none, I would like to open the public hearing.
We have no speakers?
This is when it's easy for me because I immediately go back to closing the public hearing. I don't forget. Council discussion and action. I would move approval of the staff recommendations.
I'll second.
Thanks for your efforts.
And motion carries unanimously.
Okay, thank you all. Moving on to item 10C, which is a staff report on the process of developing a policy related to mature trees and a possible ordinance. So we're going to hear from Evan Jednak in a minute. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Good evening, City Council and members of the public. I'm Evan Jednak, Senior Planner, here tonight to present item 10C, an update on the mature tree ordinance effort. So this effort was initiated by the City Council on December 8th, 2021, when the City Council directed staff to define what qualifies as a mature tree and to establish objective standards for preservation. In March 2023, staff conducted a community workshop for the public to learn about and provide feedback on the ordinance development. In June 2023, a joint study session between the Planning Commission and Urban Forestry Advisory Commission was held, and discussion topics focused on defining the mature tree, mitigation and replacement strategies, and applicability of the ordinance. After these outreach efforts, Development Services staff worked with the city arborist to review feedback and conduct further research. After discussions and in consideration of the desire to provide a reasonable and enforceable ordinance that would be effective in meeting the goals of the City Council, we developed the recommendations being presented tonight. While the general plan resource element and climate action plan reference mature trees, the term is not defined in any document, so this is the first step. Staff proposes the definition shown here. Mature tree would mean any tree with an 11-inch or greater trunk diameter, and the following native species with a 9-inch or greater trunk diameter: coast live oak, Engelmann oak, Fremont cottonwood, western sycamore, and Torrey pine. The diameter would be measured at a point 4.5 feet above the natural grade of the base of the tree, otherwise known as diameter at standard height. Certain trees are proposed to be exempt from the mature tree definition regardless of size. This would include all city-defined invasive trees, all fruit trees, and monocot species, which includes all palm trees. A key consideration of the ordinance is determining which properties or development scenarios are subject to the ordinance. Staff recommends the ordinance apply to the following properties: all public property and rights of way, private properties subject to new development, which would include any new subdivisions, multifamily developments, and commercial or mixed-use developments, and also redevelopment of private property that would affect existing landscaped or undisturbed area. Certain properties and specific trees are proposed to be exempt from the ordinance. Staff recommends that single-family properties on single lots be exempt, and this would include single-family properties with accessory dwelling units. All property within a very high fire hazard severity zone would also be exempt. Specific trees that meet the following criteria are exempt as well: if the tree is dead or in poor health, if it poses a safety risk, causes utility interference, or causes infrastructure interference. And a certified arborist would need to verify these specific cases. Staff recommends a mitigation hierarchy shown here for situations when mature trees are proposed to be removed. The primary intent of the ordinance is to preserve mature trees, so the first mitigation strategy is to preserve the tree unless it's not practical or feasible. If preservation is infeasible, the next option would be to replace the mature tree on-site. If on-site replacement is infeasible, applicants would need to replace off-site, which could include parks, schools, public rights of way, or other public places. Finally, if the replacing the tree is altogether infeasible, there could be an option for the applicant to pay an in lieu fee. Such a fee could, for example, go towards funding the Encinitas Habitat Stewardship Program, which is managed by the Parks and Recreation Department. In mitigation scenarios where replacement is required, staff recommends a 3-to-1 replacement ratio with a comparable tree species that would achieve a similar height and crown cover of the tree being removed. Replacement trees would need to be subject to the ordinance, so no exempt species allowed. The replacement ratio would be lowered to 2-to-1 if replacing with a native tree species, and conversely, the ratio would be increased to 4-to-1 in cases where off-site replacement is proposed. Enforcement of the mature tree ordinance would be the responsibility of the city arborist in conjunction with code enforcement staff. Code enforcement would work with the arborist to determine if a mature tree was removed without prior authorization and if the regulations in the ordinance were followed. And to reiterate here, the ordinance would not be applicable to single-family properties on single lots, so enforcement would be limited only to those properties subject to the ordinance. In conclusion, staff is requesting that the City Council provide feedback and policy direction on the development of the mature tree ordinance, specifically regarding the mature tree definition, ordinance applicability, mitigation strategies, and enforcement strategies recommended herein. And this concludes the presentation, and staff's available for questions.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any public comments on this item?
We have 3, Tom Cousins, Mark Wisniewski, followed by Jennifer Hewitson.
Okay, let's hear from the public.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, and staff. Staff, thanks for doing a great job. I had a beautiful PowerPoint presentation, but I blew it and didn't send it in ahead of time. So we're going to wing it. So with the mature tree ordinance, and I think I made pretty much every meeting, there's some things that I think we're missing. If you look at the best way to sequester carbon, it's not in trees. It's in grasslands by a factor of 6-to-1. If we look at what fire does to trees, and if you look at the recent fire history that we've had in our state, how many hundreds of thousands of tons of carbon have gone back into the atmosphere? I saw one article basically said, you know, we lost like 20 years worth of our efforts to keep carbon out of the air. If you look at the life expectancy of urban trees, I looked at several different sources. The low was 7. One from the Department of Agriculture is that the average life expectancy is 19 to 28 years. So think about it. If we're going to make an investment, don't we want it to be long-term? Don't we want the bank to not burn down? So if we look at the climate action plan specific to trees, and hopefully you guys had a chance to look at the email that I sent in because you got more of the details. But if you look at the action plan, trees are wonderful. I mean, if you think of reducing building energy costs, trees are right up there. We all know that, shading, moderating heat. Renewable energy, trees are a pain in the ass if they're shading your solar panels. So in any development where they're planning on solar, if you want the renewable energy, keeping existing trees could present a problem. I'm not saying it will, it could. If you look at in the Climate Action Plan, 2 strategies and goals. Water is reduce potable water consumption. Second is carbon sequestration, and it says increase urban tree cover. We got a lot of trees already in Encinitas. In the PowerPoint, I had tons of photos of what Encinitas was like 100 years ago. So if we're adding more trees, how does that reduce potable water consumption? I'm lost on that one. I water my trees. I love trees, by the way. I've put in well over a dozen. So one of the things that concerns me is trees are getting a priority. They seem to be the focus, and I get it. We love trees. Many of us are European origin and beautiful forests over there. So are we preserving them for aesthetics? Oops. So anyway, what I'd like to suggest is a very powerful and cost-effective long-term alternative. Let's invest in preserving rainforests, tropical rainforests. You can get an acre for $5.
Thank you, sir.
Mark Wisniewski?
Good evening, Mayor Kranz, members of the City Council, Mark Wisniewski, 2036 Countrywood Way, Encinitas. There's a famous, it's called the father of modern arboriculture, and he's a researcher. He's written numerous books, and in one book he says, if people would define their terms, most arguments would last less than 3 minutes, which is what I have here. 3 minutes on Google came up with mature trees are close to their full height and crown size. These dimensions being determined by species and site factors. Not all species will come to 9 inches at 54 inches above grade, including a lot of the trees that we're currently planting as part of the plantings around our community. So does that mean they're not protected? Does that mean our scrub oaks, which are named for our city was named for, may not achieve those dimensions, so they're not protected? Although the Urban Forest Advisory Committee is working on a small tree protection ordinance. So we have some things that are a little bit not quite aligned. The most important trees we have, our heritage trees, our scrub oaks, are not being protected by this ordinance or policy, and I think they should be. Again, species is important. You've got fast-growing trees, slow-growing trees, very slow-growing trees, and very fast-growing trees. Your Torrey pine can grow 3/4 of an inch to an inch in diameter per year when it's young. I was part of a United States or consulting arborist conference in Newport, Rhode Island about 25 years ago. And we were looking to determine value of different trees. And they have some very old trees there, including the first ginkgo ever planted in the United States. And we were at their county or their city library looking at a Japanese maple that was about 3.5 foot tall, trunk diameter about 2.5 inches. And the arborists from Rhode Island and Massachusetts and other New England cities and states were saying, well, that tree has a value of $65,000 to $70,000. It's over 60 years old, but it's only got a trunk this big. So we need to adjust what we're defining as mature trees to take into account growth rates of different species, including our scrub oaks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jennifer Hewitson, followed by Brad Roth.
Hello, Mayor and City Council. This is an Act Locally moment. Oh, sorry, Wotan Drive. I forget to say. Jennifer Hewitson, Wotan Drive. It's an Act Locally moment while we know globally there is a lot of work to do. I'm showing up to thank you tonight and thank staff and UFAC for putting this mature tree ordinance forward. I remember the goal 3 that then Council Member Kranz put forth, initiated in December of 21, and I'm glad to see that the evolution and details are being carefully worked out. So thank you very much. I was pleased to see specific tree species designated when trunk diameter becomes a method to identify mature trees. That's an important addition, since trunk size on older trees will vary with species. Age really should play a part as well. Another addition to the ordinance that should be included is how to measure. When tree preservation requires a specific area as a tree protection zone, a standard of measuring distance will be necessary to keep a consistent method, I'm sorry to say. Some folks will attempt to reduce that protection zone by measuring from the center of a trunk rather than the outer edge. This makes a big difference when working to protect large trees. A zone requiring measurement from a drip line, for instance, out plus 10 feet, could mean extreme pruning of trees may occur first, something to consider. We've already seen clear cutting of mature trees to avoid the effects of this ordinance, even though you have excluded single-family homes now in additions. from any burdens. Lastly, I hope you'll reconsider two mitigation options. The replacement of trees off-site and out of the area, and the in lieu fees, meaning no replacement trees planted. This defeats the goal of retaining green space and trees within all neighborhoods for human and animal residents. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Brad Roth, live in Cardiff for 45 plus years. What you see up on the screen there are two, well, one's a tree, one's a shrub. The one on the left is a Quercus barabitifolia, as far as I know. It's one of the two scrub oak species that live in here, and that's the namesake of our city. That tree is about 35 years old, and it's 4.5 or 5.5 inches, and that wouldn't be considered mature. That was taken down on development of between Methodist Church and Ricasa, where they put in the, I think it's senior living. The one on the right is a Ceanothus varicosus, and that's a warty stem Ceanothus. It's federally listed as well as the other. There are two species of scrub oaks here. Barabitifolia and a Quercus dumosa. The dumosa is federally listed as well, and it doesn't have a trunk. It's a shrub. It has acorns. It's an oak, but it doesn't have. You can't go up 4.5 feet and measure trunk diameter because there's no trunk. Looks like a garden shrub. Anyway, the one on the right's about somewhere between 30 and 40 years old, and it's 4 to 4.5 inches in diameter. Would not be listed as mature. So, reiterating Mark's point, it certainly needs to be taking into account the species, and also, the one on the right is not a tree. It's a shrub as well. So, thank you.
That concludes speakers.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I pulled up the agenda report, councilmember initiated item from December 8, 2021, and this was about the City of Encinitas General Plan Resource Management element, and it has as goal 3, the city will make every effort possible to preserve significant mature trees. And policy 3.3 of that goal states, mature trees shall not be removed or disturbed to provide public right-of-way improvements if such improvements can be deferred, redesigned, or eliminated. And so the goal of the agenda item was at that night was to better define what that might mean in terms of deferred, redesigned, or eliminated. We now have a proposed ordinance that would talk about removal, but I hope that we also are considering ways to design our streets and public rights of way in order to save trees as opposed to removing trees for the purpose of putting in 24-foot wide streets with 5-foot sidewalks or whatever all of the ideal streets are. Councilmember Lyons.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to thank all the experts in the community for always coming forward and giving us your best advice. I learned so much, and I appreciate that. I want to just start by saying I think I was able to attend all, if not most, of the public outreach meetings for this item, and I really appreciated hearing from the public and what their thoughts and concerns were. I want to compliment you, Evan, and your team for really thoughtfully putting important elements into this draft and bringing them forward to us today for our consideration. I think you captured a lot of what was said and what the prevailing knowledge is out there in the country regarding how other cities are preserving and mitigating for mature trees. So I was very happy. I was just, I felt like you did that job very well. Thank you. I do have a few questions and comments that I hope will be helpful as we move forward to finalizing our language, and I believe that's why we're here today, is to give some comments on this draft and discuss policy direction. So I'll put those forward. First, I wanted to ask if you happen to have in your back pocket the very high fire hazard zone. You mentioned it's mentioned in the document as this ordinance would not apply to that area, and I know it's a map. It's a known thing. It does change on occasion, but do you happen to have access to that you might be able to show us today? Because I'm thinking in my head, maybe you could answer the question. There's very high fire hazard, severe hazard, and then there's high fire. Are there two separate zones? Do you happen to recall?
Councilmember Lyons, they are. There is a high fire hazard area zone and a very high fire hazard area zone. And, we don't have access to a map right now. That's something we could provide out to council. And it is available online. But generally there's going to be areas in the Liebenhain where that would apply. And there are some areas around the natural space in other parts of town where that applies as well. But it's really, when you get into the very high fire hazard area zone, it's not I wouldn't say it's a significant portion of the city, but it is, there is a fair number of acres that would have that designation.
My only comment then on that is I really want to hold off on my feedback on that very high fire zone until I look at the map. But almost regardless of where it is, I wonder if we ought to give a little more thought to what we do with mature trees in those areas. And I hear the concern that we don't want to preserve mature trees in those areas because we have the belief that they are a hazard. But what does that mean then for the future development of any area in there? And I don't want to have that dialogue right now because I don't feel like I have enough information, but I don't want to just across the board say, yeah, that's exactly the right way we should go here. I want to give that some more consideration, and I don't know how my colleagues will feel about that. Sometimes the mature vegetation in high fire zones need to be managed and maintained and pruned, and maybe in some locations they would not be advisable to preserve, but I don't know if it's across the board decision. When I'm reading the ordinance, I have a few comments specific to definitions. The definition of mature trees, I didn't realize how hard that would be, but it is. I lean in the direction of, especially with the natives, being more specific by genus, by species, what the mature diameter would typically be, instead of an across-the-board, all natives would be measured by a 9-inch mature, be defined by a 9-inch diameter DBH. So I don't think it would be too much harder for us with our experts to come to terms about how that might vary by our native species. On the other hand, I look forward to the small tree work that the UFAC is going to be doing too, because that may be appropriate for capturing some of this. The other definition that I think we want to spend some time thinking about is when we're talking about replacement with a comparable tree. Comparable is really not a very specific word. Unless I missed it, perhaps I perhaps there is a little bit more definition, but it's my view that if we have a native, the comparable would be another native. So I don't know that we go to that much detail, so I think in order to understand what the expectations are, not only for ourselves, but for those who are developing land, if we could be more specific about the definition of comparable. One thing that I would hope we could add is language that talks about how do we foresee things happening that we hope won't happen, and that would be that land gets cleared before it goes to development. And one of the things that I'm aware of that has been used in at least one other city is there's a requirement for aerial photos to document over the years, and now we have access to many more resources as far as what the documentation of aerial photos on land are. I think we use a similar process when we're trying to determine natural grade versus graded grade. I've seen us look back over historical photos to determine where the actual natural grade may have been and then what the graded grade may be based on the years and how many years ago land would have been graded. And so I'm thinking that's a process that we already have in-house that we might learn from as far as what has existed on this property before a developer would come in with an application in hopes that it would discourage folks from clearing land before the development process begins. And your insights on that would be valuable to me to understand that better. I wonder, I know we've excluded single-family detached homes, and I believe that's appropriate, but I wonder if there might be an incentive when someone's adding an ADU or adding to their square footage of their house, if there could be some incentive for them to work around existing mature vegetation. I wouldn't want to mandate that, of course, but incentive, I think, can be valuable. One thing that I've seen happen is when we talk about preserving our trees in place, and I think that's the primary objective of this ordinance, is to preserve in place, is that we need to be aware and acknowledge it in our ordinance that it's not just the trunk and the canopy, that it's the root zone as well. So acknowledging that impacts to the drip within the drip line of the tree can impact the health of the tree, and perhaps allowing for that where it can't be avoided, but considering it in terms of that then becomes root pruning, and how does that impact the structural integrity of the tree, and then how do you want to then in turn prune the canopy to compensate for the fact that the roots are pruned. I know we do this root pruning and tree canopy pruning on some of our ficus along in the historic Encinitas area along 2nd Street and other streets, I think 3rd as well. It's the same kind of thing where you're going to be impacting the roots. So in order to preserve the health of the tree long term, which is what you're trying to do anyway, acknowledging that there needs to be a way to address that so that it would be successful, I think would be helpful. When we talk about mitigation on public property, on our own property that we could mitigate by planting, it's several tiers down, but if you can't preserve, then you do this and this, and one of them is on public property. In order for that to be successful, I think we really need to look in advance at where those opportunities are and define that for ourselves, because I could see us perhaps not being able to accommodate trees, whereas we think we can. I really want to know that we can before we say that that's an option. I like the idea that the fees, in lieu fees, would go to the Habitat Stewardship Program, but I want it to be extremely difficult for someone to be able to get all the way down the line of all the other options, and then the only other option is in lieu fees. So I would like to just make that as a comment and as a statement that, well, it's better than nothing, but it doesn't really address the impacts to the neighborhood that are important to mitigate. So thanks for such a good job. I look forward to hearing what my colleagues have to say.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Ehlers.
Yeah, I want to start out with a few questions. The first one is measuring diameter. Is that like if you have an oblong trunk, do you measure the minimum diameter or the maximum diameter? And does anybody know? And
I think that'd really be a good question for our city arborist, who unfortunately couldn't be with us tonight. But in my experience and having worked with trees, it would just be the oval diameter of an oblong tree. You'd measure around the outside of it. That's how I've seen it done.
the circumference.
Yeah, and if
he said
it'd just be placing a tape around the tree. If it happens to be an oval, it'd be that shape of that oval. If it's round, it'd be the circle.
Yeah, so I guess my feedback based on that is we should come up with something that is definitive in whatever the ordinance says. That if we're going to use diameter, we say min, max, whatever the standard way would be. But I don't want to leave it open to interpretation in the future. I personally think circumference is probably a even better. It's obviously a different number, but it would be hard to misinterpret at 4.5 feet up. Putting a tape around it, you're going to get a pretty succinct number. So that's one comment. Question about eucalyptus in the high fire zone. In the non-high fire zone, can a large eucalyptus qualify as a mature tree? I assume the answer is yes.
Yes, there are a couple species of eucalyptus that do appear on the city-defined invasive species list, which is taken from the county, but several eucalyptus species do not appear on that list.
Oh, okay, so some eucalyptus would be exempt from the mature tree protection, others would not. In the high fire zone, could we do something similar but in different way? In other words, if they're a native oak or anything on our replacement list, could we make those exempt? Not exempt. We make them so that the mature tree ordinance applies to them even though they're in the very high fire zone. And that's what my recommendation would be. If I had an old, out in the back end of a Liebenhain, there are some low areas where there's some beautiful old, probably 100-year-old oaks. I would never want to encourage them to be taken out or even make it easier to be taken out if they were on public land or if they were in a subdivision, let's say.
Yeah, we can certainly look into that.
Okay. And how does this proposed ordinance, how do you envision it? Let me preface this. We're called this mature. I think we're really, and I think the clarification from the speakers, this is really a large tree ordinance. Mature tree would include small mature trees, large mature trees, but we're really talking right now only large. I would encourage us to figure out a way today, before we do this mature tree, to have a mature large tree and mature small tree, especially those natives. So, and then we also have heritage trees, because we, in the proposal in front of us, palm trees cannot be mature trees eligible for protection, and I understand that. But heritage trees can be palm trees. So I want to make sure we're clear what a heritage tree is versus a mature tree, and I'd like to extend this mature tree to include local native small trees. And I don't know that I have a question formulated, but I can see there's a lot of interaction between heritage, mature tree ordinance, and our future native plant ordinance. And I just want to make sure we're coordinated in how we go forward with all these. I want to go back, and I really appreciated the mayor's comments about goal 3 of the general plan. And I love the fact you read 3.3 about public, and then there's policy 3.6 about, quote, future development shall maintain significant mature trees to the extent possible and appropriate, and incorporate them into the design of development projects. One of the things I would like to see that I didn't see in here, we had our plan consistency, strategic plan consistency. In the past, we used to always have our general plan consistency, and I'd like to see, I think that would have been a very appropriate section to incorporate into the strategic plan and general plan consistency and bring that, so anybody in the future that goes through this report, and as we keep bringing this forward, we're always going back to the general plan and the strategic plan, both. So, then last thing is Brett Farrow, who former planning commissioner, I served with him, and he's also an architect. He brought a project, and he cited the project in his letter, and hopefully we all got it, so I'm sure we saw it. But I was on the planning commission. He had to recuse himself and go down and present the project, and he kept a mature tree in the front yard right here, right downtown. And it was an interesting case to see what he had to do to protect the root zone, and what he did to keep this beautiful mature tree in a remodel and addition to this building in downtown Encinitas. Not a huge yard or anything, but it was I learned a lot, I guess. And as I go through and review this as we move forward, I'm always going to come back to that case. And I would love to invite Brett in to come review whatever you're doing, because there I think you have a ex-planning commissioner who knows the law. Number two, an architect who personally wants to preserve mature trees, and he's even probably got more than that one example, but it's the one what I interacted with him and he cited in this letter. So I'd encourage the staff to go back and leverage Brett's experience. And I'll yield at this point.
Deputy Mayor Blackwell.
Yes, thank you. Really good job. I really was enlightened by the comments from members of the public as well as the fellow council members, and great job of trying to take all the information you've gotten so far in many workshops and build a good starting point. So I hope the feedback is helpful to you. I agree with much of what I heard, and I would like us, especially with native species, to incorporate age, because again, some are small, some are larger, but having not just a 11-inch or 9-inch in case of natives diameter, but maybe think about how we define mature for natives a little bit differently. I really like the ratio for replacements and going beyond 1-to-1. I think that will be very helpful, and I agree with what's proposed. I think about what's been going on with Streetscape Segment C. We had a lot of probably mature trees that had to be taken down in the median in order to start that project. And it was pretty tough for the community members who lived around there and enjoyed the canopy of larger trees. And I think, though, if we had this ordinance in place, we would be able to replace those and maybe get replacements once Streetscape is done. So I think that's a really positive step. So again, I'd support it moving forward and hope that you get the feedback you need tonight.
Councilmember Hensy.
Thank you. I don't have too much to add, but I just want to acknowledge how much work obviously has gone into this, and something that seemingly should be really simple ends up taking up a lot of time. And I don't want to feed a fed horse. That's the PETA approved way to say that. But it really calls all these gaps that we're hearing from the community on what they'd like to see us go a little bit further to do, to me, reveal the need for the native plant ordinance, because the beautiful samples that were brought to us that were trees but shrubs that are really important to our habitat creation, that's all what we're hoping to achieve with the creation of the native plant ordinance. And then the point that Tom Cousins brought up, which I want to reiterate because I think it's so important for our region specifically, but the sequestration of carbon and grassland being 6-to-1, that's exactly the green infrastructure that my colleague Councilmember Lyons brought up in the need for the native plant ordinance in our budget meeting. So part of where I hope that we're headed to is that one time I learned that it was controversial to say that Torrey pines are native to Encinitas because they might not be. They might only be native to the areas in which we found them before. And so part of what where we're hoping to go is to develop zones even within our city that say, this is riparian habitat. Here's what's appropriate in terms of native plants for this area. Here's a high fire severity zone. This is what would be the best native plants to mitigate fire. So to me, providing this menu of options for location-appropriate plantings, be it trees or shrubs like the Encinitas, that was so beautiful. I wish I could have seen that whole thing when it was alive. That's where we're trying to go. So I do want to acknowledge that, and also all the work that's going on, and touch on what Councilmember Ehlers said about the heritage tree outreach, because I think there's a perception within certain communities that trees are so important. Like individual trees are so important, and we don't take the next step in that neighborhood to say, let's nominate that as a heritage tree so that we can make sure it's taken care of for the next generation. So anything that we can do as part of the education for the next steps for the mature tree ordinance to expand the education efforts around our heritage tree outreach, I think would be really important. See if there's anything else I wanted to ask. Oh, how would we be determining the in lieu fee?
We have not discussed how we'll be determining the in lieu fee at this point.
Okay. Yeah, to me, that's another opportunity for habitat preservation that we should be ascribing a value to, because even if there isn't a beautiful Torrey pine somewhere, but we do have these tall Encinitas plants or scrub oaks that just look like a bush and not a tree, we should be able to identify those and say there's a real value, financial value associated with that, and it needs to be translated to a fee that we can improve our habitat elsewhere. So that's it. Thank you.
So a couple of questions. The couple of the speakers mentioned scrub oak, which, as I read it, don't qualify for this ordinance. Am I understanding that correctly?
That's correct.
So the diameter being less than 9 inches really is moot because they're not protected anyways.
Yeah, that's correct. So this effort would be to protect the trees as opposed to the scrubs.
The other thing that was mentioned is that, there are books which define mature trees and their size. Did we consult that before we established 9 inches as the benchmark for a mature tree?
Yeah, we did a lot of research with other cities and in conjunction with the city arborist to land on the 11-inch and the 9-inch for natives.
Okay. Well, I think that I too would like to make sure that that's well defined in terms of, I'd hate to see a tree that's 40 years old, which clearly by definition is mature, but because it's an inch or two short of our mark, creates a problem and means it's death. So I think that, hanging a number on it can be dangerous because there are all sorts of factors about what might cause a trunk at that height off the ground to not necessarily meet the criteria that we've established by ordinance. So I don't mind. I think it's probably a fairly safe number, and probably 98% of the trees are going to be saved by this definition of a mature tree. But I sure hope we have a way of litigating that, or having some conversation about why it may not meet that particular criteria. I too, I was impressed. I saw a magazine article, online article about Brett Farrell's project on San Diego, where it's a little different project than the one that you're talking about, where he built a courtyard that included, they craned in a tree and put it in there. So it's coming up through the roof of this home that they built. He told me the story of that particular project where he tried to save a Torrey pine tree, but it turned out that, and as you read from the comments that he sent in, sometimes the grading for a construction site means it's almost impossible to save trees like Torrey pines with huge root systems and such. So, but I do think, to Brett's point in his email to us, the notion of creating incentives for a property owner to save mature trees as part of his project which might mean maybe the front yard setback is reduced in order to shift the dwelling away from a tree that they're trying to save. So I don't know if other jurisdictions have rules like that, but it would be good to put in some incentives for single-family developments. We have these other projects that fall under these rules. Obviously, any ability to incentivize saving those trees would be good too. But my number one concern is that our process in development services, where we request a developer to design their project with our textbook street widths and street treatments, sidewalks. If a tree's in the way and that full sidewalk can't be built, we tell them to remove the tree. I think that it would be good if we had a different approach that required that they first try and design around that. And I've had conversations with the Director of Development Services in the past where that's kind of Plan B. The Planning Commission can direct the developer to try and work around it, but right out of the gate, the developer has identified trees that will be removed that otherwise might be possible to work around. And in the meantime, neighborhoods, go through the mourning process of losing mature trees, and it can be pretty impactful. So you need to smack me in the side of the head or something.
I was just going to say, so one thing that I wanted to mention, because you mentioned this before, is that we do have a conflict between our requirements for sidewalks, bike lanes, and this mature tree will now be in conflict. So I think at one point, when you come back with the actual design of the ordinance, I know it's really hard, but you're going to have to let us know which of those three things trump the other thing, because sometimes the road width is not large enough for the sidewalk, bike lane, and the tree. And so we try to make it as easy as possible for somebody coming to the counter, but we've already had situations where people coming in to do work are confused by whether or not they're supposed to be trying to save the tree or trying to put in the bike lane.
Well, I appreciate what you're saying, and I didn't want, we don't want to get development specific, but I think that one of the things I've noticed in other projects in the past is that there are ways to create traffic calming treatments on streets so that you may not have a straight sidewalk. You may have a sidewalk that has a little bend to it, and it creates a chicane or a bulb out, whatever you want to call it, and it gives you the ability to save the tree. And, if it's a certain type, if it's a collector street, maybe that's possible. If it's a different category of street, it might not be possible to use that particular treatment. So I know it can be challenging to work through those issues, but I think that the ethic of this community has always been to do what we can to save our urban forest. And I know Tom Cousins is interested in saving the urban forest, but he also sees that it can be counterproductive at times, I guess you would say. But ultimately, there are two things that I think drive this for me. Shade, the opportunity for shade. It's well known that shade is beneficial to an urban environment, and also wildlife. We have birds that need these forests, these urban forests, and these big trees. So that, to me, is what drives what we're doing here. And it is important, I think, to continue the work. I don't know if we've given enough direction. Councilmember Ehlers would like to speak again.
Yeah, I had a couple things to follow up, and you brought up one more. So I think I can answer the city manager's question based on policy 3.2 of the general plan. And it's, quote, mature trees shall not be removed or disturbed to provide public right-of-way improvements if such improvements can be deferred, redesigned, or eliminated. So I think the general plan says that. It's pretty clear. It's a shall, it's not a should. So that I think if we want to change that, we should change it, but at least we have a policy there. The other things I wanted to add is I would support where we're talking about replacement trees. Well, I didn't catch all the other subspecies, but Demosa, and I would like to add those in as options, at least the native trees I have that are original, undisturbed in my development area. I don't know what hybrid they are, so I don't know how you describe if they're a hybrid between an Engelmann and a local, they're all local, but I'd like to say local oaks be an option for replacement too. And also, what about native willow? Because they're not that small and they can grow fairly large and they're quite prolific around the area. Next point would be mitigation ratios, and I think this builds on something I believe Joy was talking about, and I was trying to offer a proposal. What I'd like to see is encouraging we keep the mitigation nearby, and as you get further away, it gets a greater ratio. And so I'm going to throw something out just as something to ponder. If it's on-site, it's a mitigation ratio of maybe 1 to 1. If it's within 300 feet, which is our standard notification methodology, we do 2 to 1. If it goes out to within half a mile mitigation, it goes 3 to 1, and if it's off-site, it's 5 to 1. And that would be a way to encourage and keep the forest near where the tree was and help, hopefully, long-term, get the trees to grow back in the area. But some other, if you came up with a better mitigation. And my wife used to work in Thousand Oaks, and they are all about their oaks. And her company Prudential Insurance was building a new facility there. And the lengths to which they went to preserve mature oaks in Thousand Oaks was incredible. So hopefully you had a chance to look at Thousand Oaks in there. I am sure 40 years ago they had a tree preservation ordinance. They probably have some pretty good knowledge there as far as what it takes, how it works. The new facility that she moved into out there, they had oaks that they left in place, and they built the cafeteria courtyard around it and stuff. So they did a great job. Let's see, talked about the general plan, and last but not least, I forgot, great work. I really appreciate, I can see all the work that went into this from a planning standpoint, having 7 years of planning commission experience, I feel for the amount of work you've done here. Keep it up.
Councilmember Lyons.
Just a few more comments now that I've heard what my colleagues think as well. So arid lands, trees are a little bit different than standard single trunk trees, and we are in an arid environment here. So I think I want to just reinforce what's been said about when it comes to the natives. I think an easy way to address whether they're mature or not isn't necessarily by their height, but I think it's by species or by diameter. I think it's more by species. And many of them are multiple trunk. And so the industry standard is 4.5 feet. You called it diameter standard height. It used to be called diameter breast height. That's a standard arboriculture measurement, and it's the diameter of not only the main trunk, but when you have multiple trunks, it's combining the trunks together. So you add all the trunks at that height. But there is an industry standard for that, and I think it would simplify things for everyone if we just follow the industry standard on how to measure trunk width and do it and create diameters based on the species. I still lean towards the multiples of mitigation, Evan, that you and your team have put in. I really do like the 2 to 1 and the 3 to 1 as really incentivizing preserving in place because it's often the first response, like, I need to put my house here, 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 here. And there's trees? Well, I'll get rid of them. But really what we want to do is incentivize the developer and the city as well, when we do things, to identify what's important and to work around it. So incentivizing preserving in place, I think, is best done when we have a higher than 1 to 1 mitigation ratio. So I'm in favor of the 2 to 1 and the 3 to 1. Goodness, there was one other thing. I apologize, I may not. Oh, yes, for the public sector work, I do see that we can be our own worst enemy when it comes to mature trees in the city, because I have heard us interpret, well, we need a bike lane, we need a sidewalk, and so we can't save the tree. And so I just wanted to reinforce that. I've heard that, and I don't think that conforms with the general plan standard. And I also think, and I appreciate, Mayor, that you mentioned traffic calming. We now have some new standards for some really nice traffic calming that the city has put in place that could be used very readily, because it is now a new standard, in combination with how do we address saving a tree that's very close to a sidewalk and a bike lane, so that we can save the tree and do the other things too. Those are my 3 comments. Thank you.
Okay, have we given enough comments and directions, and do you have stuff you can work with from here?
Mayor Kranz, yeah, I think we've received some great direction from council and a lot of things for us to chew on and move this forward. And I think one of the things that we were already thinking and I'm taking away from tonight is that preservation comes first. That one of the things that we think of, and we think of some of the projects that we've seen where trees have been interrupted by right-of-way and folks are expecting they go away because they're doing a right-of-way improvement. An ordinance like this will give us the leverage from the first conversation with the developer to talk about how it is we're going to keep that tree and potentially have the sidewalk go on the property side of the tree as opposed to the street side of the tree like we'd usually see, and other really give us the tools that it would take to work towards preservation as a first strategy.
Yes, thanks. I appreciate you picked that up. I think the other comment I would make to close this item out is there are sometimes gray areas on all the things that you guys do, and so making decisions is not as simple as a decision tree sometimes, and sometimes there are judgment calls to be made. I think that this city would benefit by having a better hearing process, even if it meant coming to the council, depending on size of development and other things. I remember Desert Rose came to us with a reduction in the setback from 50 feet to 25 feet, wetland setback. And the only body that could grant that exception, that reduction, is the city council. And by the time it got to the city council, this project had been designed, it had been through the planning commission, it had it left the city council with not a great choice. So those are the sort of things that I think we would benefit if we had a hearing system that allowed decisions such as that, or modification to street width requirements. Those are the sort of things that I think we would benefit if there was a hearing process. I don't know if other jurisdictions have those, but I certainly would be interested in hearing more about that. Down the road, it could be something that we have on an agenda. With that, we will move on. Thank you all. We are now on to item 11A, which is an informational item. Our mobility manager, Nick Buck, is going to update us on issues related to mobility in Encinitas. And Nick is our mobility manager who operates out of the Parks and Rec Department, and so we have the interim director of Parks here also, Mr. Royce Powell. I would also point out that I was, again, when we get to the AB 1234 report time, I'm going to be mentioning that I attended a cow bike conference down in San Diego last week, and Nick was there and Kelly was there, and it was 2 days full of lots of bike safety conversations, mobility conversations, and It was great to see you and the rest of your team. Ian was there, Abe was there one day, others from the traffic engineering department were there, and it's really good to have everybody pretty focused on this stuff. So thank you. Go ahead.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and members of the council and the public. Thank you for the opportunity to present this evening, and I'm pleased to update you about the non-infrastructure mobility work and projects that I'm working on. You see in the overview some of the things that we'll discuss tonight. First up, we'll talk about education. Our community cycling classes are generally held the third and fourth Saturday of the month. Our classes are 3 hours long, and with 1 hour in the classroom, then practicing drills in a parking lot environment, then the remainder of the class on a ride to learn and practice using bike facilities. We continually tune and tailor those classes to provide thorough education and on-the-bike practice using local infrastructure, and to teach in a way that equips riders to be conspicuous, make the best informed choices about where and how to ride based on their level of experience, comfort, and abilities. Something new, and as a result of trauma ER visits indicating that there are almost as many older adults coming into hospitals, minors, the city's partnering with Scripps Injury Prevention to offer a 55 and up specific bike and e-bike safety class. We're offering two different things. One is a webinar on Tuesday, May 21st, and then followed by an in-person 3-hour class on Saturday, June 22nd. Again, we're working with Scripps and other partners, and we'll begin promoting those classes this week. I'd also like to note that our schools have done a lot of work this year in bringing education into the classroom, so kudos to our schools for being great partners in educating our students. Also, kudos to nearby cities, including Carlsbad, Oceanside, Vista, and partners like the Bike Coalition, who continue to offer many great programs to educate. Additionally, our sheriffs have a lot of interactions with the public, and they take every opportunity to educate, and their communication tells us that behavior is changing and improving. We work closely with our schools to support their efforts to educate students about bike safety. In December, we entered into MOUs with EUSD and San Diego to support their education efforts relating to bike safety and skills. In April and May, we have 6 bike rodeos scheduled for our Encinitas Union School District schools. That's really exciting, so great that we're getting that in place this year. That's really going to front load education for students going into middle school that have requirements for permitting at their schools too. The city applauds the effort of Bike Walk Encinitas and the various schools who have their own programs to encourage biking and walking. Examples of this are Bow Wows, that's a fun thing to say, but that's Bike on Wednesday and Walk on Wednesday, and other programs like Drive to 5 and Walking School Buses, other things that we look forward to exploring and being good partners in the schools with. Our school crossing guard program has proven highly effective during school pickup and drop-off times. In December and February, the city amended our existing MOUs to add more guards at a couple of locations. And we feel like we're in a pretty good place now with the number of guards and the coverage that we've got. So we'll be looking to formalize an MOU for next school year as well. Just briefly want to talk about some education that's out there. There is an existing California Highway Patrol program that was taken on in response to e-bike use across the state, and that's when the CHP worked with the governor's administration, the legislature, and other stakeholders to develop the state's first e-bike safety and training program. That CHP course has 11 sections that cover topics such as proper equipment and gear, rules of the road and bike laws, and avoiding hazards and best practices. Another one that's out there is the League of American Cyclists and People for Bikes project that was in partnership with Bicycle Colorado. That course includes a series of 5 videos, and there's a test component with it too. So those are out there. There's others as well, some different models. And while those courses are good, we think that we can do better. And so the city has been meeting with partners including Rady Children's Hospital, Scripps Health, UCSD, and San Diego Union High School District to start work on potentially an online course. And really, I think the cool thing about what we're working toward there is that the course would have options for a user to select their own city or school, so that the portions of the curriculum feature visuals that line up with the environment that they see around them. Also to touch on different school rules or policies, and also to reflect the law enforcement philosophies and also local ordinance of those communities. So that's something that we're working toward, and we'll report back on that, I'm sure. Talking about outreach and resources, last year we made the cyclist and driver-targeted campaign signs that you've seen. We've still got some more of those. Feel free to grab those on the way out, put them somewhere around town. Really, that's the message that we've been promoting, is ride safe, drive safe, and we'll continue to do that. We continue to update the city web content with information about safety rules and laws, wayfinding, education, and resources. And we recognize the commendable work that our neighboring cities are doing to get information out to the public, and we look to collaborate to provide consistent messaging and to share resources as well. Coming up, the city will issue an RFP for video production services, and we look to use our PEG funding to get serious about rolling out more video content. So we have every intention of developing a series on that theme of bike safe, drive safe, which will share important and useful information to cyclists and drivers about sharing the roadways, communicating with one another, and making smart and safe choices when encountering various infrastructure. I'd like to share about our public bike share program. On March 22nd, Encinitas B-Cycle gave a 60-day notice of termination. They made the difficult decision to discontinue operations due to a lack of profitability over the 2-year period. B-Cycle has been terrific to work with and responsive to the desire of the city to have a well-managed, unobtrusive solution to provide a fun and healthy transportation option to both locals and visitors. It's important to note that the challenges faced by B-Cycle are not unique. According to Sandag, many, if not most, bike share programs in the San Diego region have struggled to achieve long-term financial sustainability. And here in Encinitas, several factors likely contributed to the program's lack of ridership, including high personal e-bike ownership, abundant alternative rental options, and perhaps limited commuter utility. Staff in Encinitas B-Cycle collaboratively explored various options to address the program's financial challenges and long-term viability. Unfortunately, those efforts, we just couldn't find a sustainable path forward to the program, and so we couldn't continue with that. In moving forward, while the city's not exploring a new bike share program at this time, staff remain committed to promoting sustainable and accessible transportation options. Staff will take this opportunity to focus on a few areas. The city will explore ways to promote local retailers who offer bike rentals to residents and visitors. This may include creating a directory of rental shops and facilitating partnerships with tourism organizations. Additionally, the city may develop a promotional campaign highlighting the benefits of traveling Encinitas by bike and on foot. And staff are researching and exploring the feasibility of implementing an on-demand and route-based microtransit service utilizing small fleet electric vehicles. In this innovative approach, public transportation offers potential advantages, including flexibility and convenience compared to fixed route bus systems. Also, improved access to transportation in areas not well served by public transit. As stated in the Council's 24-25 strategic plan, the city's focus on mobility and alternative modes means we strive to be a nationwide leader in mode choice by providing data-driven solutions to create safe and functional transportation network, along with programs that educate and empower people to reach destinations by active transportation and micromobility. Staff have begun work on a comprehensive safety action plan, which will supplement the city's existing local road safety plan by addressing gaps identified by the Vision Zero network. In the coming months, we'll incorporate additional safety analysis, update our plan to align with best practices of the Safe Systems Approach planning, and we'll conduct outreach events to involve stakeholders in the city's Vision Zero efforts. Simply put, If Vision Zero, safe mobility for all, is our goal, then the safe system approach is how we get there. The safe system approach is human-centered, placing safety as the priority, and includes strategies oriented around the 5 elements, which are safe road users, safe roads, safe speeds, safe vehicles, and post-crash care. This alignment will require a view of existing Encinitas LRSP strategies to ensure they adhere to the principles of the safe systems approach. Having a comprehensive safety action plan best positions the city to compete for federal and state grant funding for local safety improvements and to achieve recognition as a Vision Zero community. Okay, some fun stuff coming up. Tonight, the mayor proclaimed May as Bike Month in Encinitas, and annually we state our commitment to promoting active transportation, climate strategies, and the joy of cycling. The San Diego region celebrates National Bike Month this May by participating in Sandag's Bike Anywhere Day on Thursday, May 16th. The annual event, formerly known as Bike to Work Day, encourages everyone to ride to work, school, the beach, or anywhere. On that day, there'll be 100 pit stops from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. across the region for refreshments, for cycling support, different giveaways, just fun stuff at booths. The Encinitas pit stop will be hosted in partnership with the Bike Walk Encinitas Group and our local Trek store and Encinitas electric bicycles. And then we're gearing up for Ciclovia Encinitas on May 19th. That event closes the Coast Highway from D to J Street to cars for people to enjoy on bike, foot, skates, scooters, or any people-powered means. This being the 4th time we've put on the event, we look to further engage community groups, schools, clubs, businesses to participate in the event with hosted booths, activities, and promotions. And it's always our intent to create activities that promote active transportation and to see the world a little differently, considering other ways to get around. And if you haven't been to it, we encourage you to get out and check it out, and invite your friends and neighbors. All right, at this time, have something to share. We've recently completed a comprehensive Ride Safe, Drive Safe video, all filmed in Encinitas with input and participation from Bike Walk Encinitas, the San Diego County Bike Coalition, featuring community volunteers and students from San Diego Academy. The video features many of Encinitas' terrific facilities and improves important information and tips for cyclists and drivers alike to share our roadways. The video will be promoted through city channels and shared with our community partners to reach the public.
As a cyclist, all around the city, you'll find different types of roadways to travel. You're encouraged to use the type of route that is most comfortable for your experience, your speed, and your abilities. As a driver, you may be concerned about how to interact with bicycles on the roadway. In this video, we'll give cyclists and drivers tips to ride and drive in the right places and ways you can communicate to comfortably share the road and to be safe. Let's take a look at some of the different types of bike infrastructure out there. First up, sharrows. What is a sharrow, you ask? It's a pavement marking that indicates that a lane is shared by both cyclists and drivers. Sharrows are usually painted with a bicycle image with 2 inverted V shapes above the bicycle image. This indicates that cyclists may take the full lane. Normally, sharrows exist on roads that don't have enough lane width for cars to safely pass a cyclist using the same lane, or where a bike lane doesn't exist. Not all roads are marked with sharrows. Be aware that anywhere that a road is too narrow to share, cyclists are able to and should take the full lane. Cyclists, don't hug the side of the road. It will only send a message to drivers to squeeze past, and that's not safe. If you're driving and encounter a cyclist taking the lane, first, respect that they have a right to be there. And if you wish to pass, do it carefully, allowing plenty of room for everyone. Next, bike lanes. On many improved streets where lane width allows, there are dedicated bike lanes. They are often on the right side of the traffic lane and striped with solid white paint and may include green markings. Riders should always ride in the same direction as traffic and be alert of moving vehicles, doors of parked cars, and other hazards. If you need to exit a bike lane, always first scan for a safe opening, then signal before making a lane change. On busy, wide, or high-speed roadways, consider using crosswalks to navigate intersections. Drivers should always scan carefully for cyclists in a bike lane before making a right turn across it. If a cyclist is coming from behind, slow and wait until the cyclist has passed, rather than hurrying to make the right turn in front of a cyclist. Cyclists always have the right-of-way in a bike lane, so when driving and entering a bike lane to make a right turn, always yield. Cycle tracks, paths, and trails. Dedicated paths for bikes make for an enjoyable place to ride. These types of facilities can be busy, so please look out for each other's safety. Cyclists should always ride at a speed appropriate for the amount of traffic and adhere to posted speed limits. Wherever cycle paths approach intersections, riders must obey all signs. As a driver, use extra caution when crossing bike paths, and please don't stand or unload into bike paths. That's not just rude, it's dangerous. When riding on shared paths, slow it down and be courteous around others and only pass when safe to do so. Asking to pass on the left or using a bell is always advised. Generally, always stay to the right and pass on the left, and leave plenty of room for oncoming path users. When using trails, always adhere to posted rules about bikes and yield to other trail users. On many trails, bikes or e-bikes may not be allowed. Ride and drive alert. Cyclists and drivers alike should ride and drive alert, always looking out for one another, paying close attention to bikes and cars approaching and entering the roadway. Communication is key. When at intersections, both bikes and cars should always signal their intentions. Cyclists should always scan before direction changes and use hand signals to indicate left and right turns. It's simple. When cycling, point which way you're turning or point straight ahead if you're not turning. Look to establish eye contact with the other person. It's always good to give a cue that you understand what they intend to do. Both cyclists and drivers should be alert around driveways. Riders should approach any car in a driveway with caution, with enough room to maneuver or stop. Drivers should always move slowly and look carefully for cyclists when entering a roadway. Anytime you're cycling along a row of parked cars, give yourself plenty of room in case a car door swings open. And drivers, get in the habit of looking out for bikes when opening your doors. Be seen. As a cyclist, it's always advised to have lights on, even in the daytime. In daylight hours, a white light in front and a red light in back makes you far more visible to cars. For daytime, flashing lights are most visible, while at night, a steady pattern is better for the depth perception of drivers. Speaking of visibility, consider a bike with permanent lights, or put some on the bike you have. At night, it's the law to have a white light on the front of the bike and a red reflector, or better yet, a red light in the rear. Also, consider wearing bright or light-colored clothing with reflective materials and a bright or light-colored helmet. For anyone under 18, a fitted, buckled helmet is always required by law and strongly advised for adults too, and for Class 3 e-bikes required by law. As a cyclist, ride where you're visible to drivers, avoid sidewalks when possible, and note that in business districts, you must get off and walk your bike on sidewalks and dismount to use crosswalks. Your positioning says a lot to drivers, so make appropriate lane choices. Always choose the rightmost lane that takes you in the direction you are going. Also, while talking about visibility, you might be wondering, what's up with all the green paint? The bright green color is meant to increase the visibility of cyclists using bike lanes and highlight potential areas of conflict between bikes and cars. Green paint isn't applied everywhere, so always be on the lookout for cyclists, especially when making right turns and turning left across traffic at intersections. Ride safe, drive safe. Let's help to ensure we all get to where we're going safely. Make choices about your bike route that best suit your experience, skills, and level of comfort. Enjoy your time on the bike. You're encouraged to use the type of route that is most comfortable for your experience, your speed, and your abilities. When cycling, be sure your actions and your equipment make you most visible to others. Drivers and cyclists alike, let's all communicate with other road users, move predictably, and stay alert to anticipate situations and always travel at a safe speed. Let's all ride safe and drive safe. Together. Ride safe, drive safe. All right, and with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
I recognize many of the people in that video, and riders and drivers. I saw Karen there backing out of the driveway, right? Uh-huh.
You had a close
Very
call.
careful.
What you learned.
Yeah.
Did you recognize the voice, voiceover?
No. Oh, the voiceover, heck yeah. You probably, that was long enough maybe to qualify for one of those union cards up in
SAG
Hollywood
card.
there, so.
Yeah.
Yep. No, I wouldn't go that far. Anyhow, let's see, I will close that, and Councilmember Hensy.
Thank you. I love the video. So comprehensive and really clear, and it looks expertly shot. It doesn't look amateur at all. So nice work on that. I wouldn't expect anything less from you, Nick.
Thanks.
I just wanted to highlight one thing, and that is that a lot of the work that goes on for the city's programming takes place in our school district liaison committee meetings, where we get frequent updates from you. There's a great dialogue between the principals and the superintendents and whoever chooses to show up that day and advocate for specific projects. And one thing that I continue to hear, and that Captain Watt's predecessor, Captain Lawrence, did such a great job with, was being really responsive to the schools. And they are always asking for more enforcement for those weeks when school's resuming session or when kids are out from session, like for summer break or for winter break. And they say that that's the time when the driver behavior is usually the worst, and having that extra presence around the school sites really boosts behavior for the weeks that follow. So I'm wondering if maybe you'd be willing to join us at one of our school district liaison committee meetings, or come up with a plan, this is for you, Captain Watts, to meet with our EUSD representatives and our San Diego High School Union representatives, so that every year they don't have to make that request. It's just kind of something that we do proactively. So that's the only thing that I wanted to say. Great work, Nick. Thank you, everybody who's contributed to the success of these programs. It's really wonderful to see hundreds of kids have been trained. And also now that we're able to switch our focus towards adults 55 and older, because we do see on the accident reports as council members that a lot of those injuries are older folks. So great work. Thank you.
Thanks.
Councilmember Raylers.
Yeah, also great video, and what a wonderful vintage VW van used in the scenes to it, and it looked great, looked very professional. I had a question, actually a technical question, or a legal question about, I know cars cannot pass bicyclists and squeeze by them on a Sharrow lane. What about the inverse? Can a bicyclist, if traffic is slowing, can a bicyclist go by in the margin and squeeze by? Or is a Sharrow lane, you have to stay in order no matter whether bicycle in front or a car in front? And maybe that's a question for a sheriff or a traffic sergeant.
I mean, a cyclist could pass a car if it was a situation where they're like, queuing up to park, something like that is the question. If
I'm actually asking if they're driving along in the lane, because the idea of a Sharrow is if the bicycle is going 15 miles an hour and the speed limit is 25, the car can come up to the bicycle but cannot pass within the same lane. I suppose if there's an available second lane, they could move over. But I'm talking about a situation where it's a Sharrow lane and there's no other option. Are they stuck behind that car? The bicyclist is, the car is stuck behind the bicyclist if that's the situation. But is the inverse true? Can a bicyclists, because here's my concern, and I just wonder what the legality is. Quite often you're on a Sharrow and you're driving along and you may be deciding to do something and a bike goes whizzing by on that narrow Sharrow lane. I'm just wondering, is it legal?
Yeah, it's a good question. The same rules of the road would apply to a cyclist and a driver alike. I wonder if the sheriff has any other comment on that in that kind of instance.
Yeah, I would probably do a little bit more research myself, but I believe that if it is a shared lane, then they are dedicated like a car. However, if we're coming to a stop, then they would also be able to traverse to the front like a motorcyclist would be able to.
Okay, they can legally do that then,
Right.
at an intersection at a minimum. So
Right.
I'd be curious if you find out what the legalities are elsewhere. So great. Questions about the B-Cycle, and I know B-Cycle is owned by Trek Bicycle. Did they shut down the operations just in San Diego, or were they shutting down other, or I should say in Encinitas, or were they shutting down other operations nationwide?
While Trek did cease operations for some of the B-cycle programs with, across the country, they did close the Encinitas operation. This has been a site that's been challenging for them to make it work. Our system is unlike many others that perform really well for them. We don't have like a huge college or, the same kind of landscape for transit. So, yeah, some of the programs do better than others. It is the bike industry is tightening up for sure. So Trek was looking at some of these low-performing programs and having to make some tough decisions there.
Okay, and so it was multiple around the country. It wasn't 100% unique, although I know they were founded in Madison, Wisconsin, that area, which is a huge school city. And then as far as now that did they shut down yet? Have they officially shut down? And are the bicycles still there?
Yeah, they gave notice on March 22nd, and then the drawdown will occur between now and May 20th. So you'll see some of the stations disappearing around town. They'll keep the best performing sites operational until as close as they can to the end of that term, so right up until the 20th.
Okay, and at the end of the term, it sounds like they have the obligation to remove
Correct.
everything, and then I assume return the pavement to some level of repaired condition that the city will approve?
Yeah, those come out pretty cleanly, but we'll coordinate with Public Works and make sure that they're to our satisfaction when those are removed and that everything's looking good and clean.
Okay, great, thank you.
And I'd add that Kevin Cox, who is runs Electrobike here in Encinitas, they're headquartered here. They are a company that's owned by Trek, as is B-Cycle. I met with Kevin a couple of times to try and talk a little bit about ways we might be able to keep the program in operation. But Nick, in his presentation, mentioned the issue of profitability, and the reality is that there was not even a whiff of profitability. They were taking a bath, and that's what caused them to finally decide that they were going to pull out. In the interim, as we were having conversations, I did a little research, and I came across a table on Wikipedia having to do with bike sharing programs around the country, and it's around the world, and I was shocked to see just how many of them that start up actually fail. And so it's unfortunate. B-Cycle has a program in Santa Barbara that's very successful, and a big part of that is they have a lot of hotels and they have college students. So those are the sort of things that have happened. Councilmember Lyons.
Yeah, thank you, Nick, for presenting. I've been looking forward to this, being that your position is new. I'm still getting my head around it, and it helps for you to have this opportunity to present to us. 2 questions. If you said it, I apologize. Where is this video going to be shown? Is it on our website, or what's your plan there?
Yeah, you're really the first to see it tonight. This will be coordinated with our communications division to figure out how to roll it out. This will live on our city's YouTube for sure, and then hosted on a couple of different web pages on the city website. And then, as we've done for a few years now, we'll share this as a resource to different community groups like HOAs and also with our school districts so that they have it to use as they will.
Good, thanks. And also, being that it's that your position's kind of new, regarding Ciclovia coming up, do you plan to have some engagement with the public associated with mobility and your programs? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, great question. At the event, we have a pretty large handful of city booths, representing coastal programs and sustainability, engineering, and then, of course, mobility planning and also mobility programs. And, there we talk about mobility and traffic safety, and then all these things as well. Talk about educational opportunities that are out there. And we partner well with Bike Walk Encinitas, so we're coordinating what that booth will look like with some engagement activities. Yeah, plenty of booths, and beyond the city booths, we've got the Sheriff's Department and plenty of nonprofit partners. So a lot of us kind of doing similar work to promote active transportation, encourage people to be safe, and, check out all the great things that the city is doing.
Great. I'm glad to hear that. Using that event as an opportunity for education is wonderful. So I'm happy you're doing it, and it sounds like it's going to be a little bit broader than it has been in the past.
Yeah, and this is the fourth time that the city's put on Ciclovia Encinitas. This is the first time that we've had it in the month of May. So that was always kind of a dream to get to move it to align with Bike Month. So we're happy to put it in May, and we hope and expect that it's going to have a great turnout and that people will really enjoy it in, hopefully warmer spring months.
All right, thank you.
And I recall, Councilmember Lyons, in your days as a commissioner on the Environmental Commission, you were leading a subcommittee of you and a woman from Leucadia put together the first plan for Cyclovia. So great job.
Thank you for mentioning that. And Nick was there all along as well, making it happen.
Been along, yep, for the ride. Quick question. We had talked a lot about the notion of training the trainers. Is that program happening at all, or have we beefed up our certified trainers?
Yeah, through the program that we ran in late fall. So we had a train the trainer program, or actually it was a certification program that we offered at that time. So 8 locals and semi-locals were certified as league instructors. So those are folks that are able to teach bike safety classes. So of that group, we have a few that are teaching locally, and then we're just looking for opportunities to plug in others. So as we expand into education for individuals other than teens that tend to pack out our classes that we regularly offer, could be really a neat opportunity to get others involved in classes that are more specific for adults and adults 55 and up. So as we kind of build out our catalog of the education programs that we offer, I think there'll be good opportunities to plug them in. And as far as a train the trainer or where this goes in the future, it's something that we'll evaluate whether we want to do another round of certification or to train up folks to teach additional types of programs, as we get through the rest of this year.
Good. I follow PE teacher on Twitter who's a big bike bus guy, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that group of teachers, PE teachers, is one that we should probably be working with school districts to get certified as trainers, because that PE class is a great opportunity for that sort of instruction.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of conversation about, if this could be integrated within the schools, within their school year, where it would lie. And I think there's a lot of interest in incorporating, some of this curriculum into kind of that PE place within the schools.
Great. I see no more requests from my colleagues to speak, so I will thank you for all your efforts. I appreciate the work of the Sheriff's Department in enforcing our laws and keeping kids safe. So thank you, and adults, right? 55. I would qualify for that class, by golly. Probably should take it too. Okay, our next item is City Council member reports pursuant to AB 1234.
I have 2 things to report. The first was I chaired the Sandag Sustainable Communities Working Group last week, and nothing significant to report there. And then this morning, Councilmember Ehlers and I'll let him talk about a portion of it, attended the Encinitas Wastewater Authority Board meeting where we approved our budget for this coming fiscal year. I'll speak about the capital improvement side of it, and that is that we ended up deferring a significant amount of our capital program in order to keep our budget down. And in a way, I just want to say I think that's good and that's prudent, and we're trying to do it in a way that's responsive. But our wastewater treatment facilities, in this case anyway, it's an old facility with a lot of needed maintenance and a lot of needed capital improvement in order to keep us from being at risk of not being able to operate in a manner. So we're always trying to juggle that, but I just wanted to report that was our decision this morning.
And I obviously attended the same one. The only thing I would add to that is that Encinitas is a relatively small percentage of Encina, and because our flow rates have not gone up, and we don't have a lot of the pump stations that the other member agencies have, our net rates our net is going up like 4%. So it's really pretty low. We didn't have much to complain about. The other municipalities and entities had much, double-digit increases. So we got off easy.
Quick report with NCTD. Last Thursday, we closed the public hearing to add service through NCTD in the Sorrento Valley area. It's a really encouraging step for us, and we have a lot of interest from private property owners and businesses to take part in that new service. So it's basically connecting the coaster that gets off at Sorrento Valley and then providing routes to UCSD campuses and hospitals and other private businesses. It's the biggest business center in the whole county of San Diego, so it's great that we're able to do it. And then, as the mayor reported, I was able to attend the Cal Bike Conference last week, and I was inspired and really happy to see so many city employees there. And it was really educational and inspiring. I think that's all I have to report.
And one question about the service to Sorrento Valley. NCTD was required to do that because MTS pulled out. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I don't know that we were required to do it. I think that we saw an opportunity because we had already been contributing to that route through MTS. And so it's going to be, I think, $522,000 additional for us a year to operate that, which isn't a whole lot of money. And it could be offset by the elimination of private shuttles that some businesses are currently using, or just to, as the region continues to grow, to offset vehicle miles traveled through some of these menu options to contribute to transit instead of having parking requirements. So it's really exciting. It's not so often that you can have a program like that put in place.
And it's a unique situation because MTS was operating it because it's in the MTS area of service, right? So that was why they were doing it all along, although it's kind of an island when it comes to their main service, trolley services and such. So NCTD operating in MTS territory now is going to be somewhat unique, but I've always scratched my head and wondered why a region of our size has 2 transit districts. So anything that kind of blurs that line, I think, is good in the end. Thank you for that report, Councilmember or Deputy Member Blackwell.
Yes, nothing to report tonight.
Okay, and yes, I really enjoyed attending the Cal Bike Summit. There was a lot of conversation about the big transportation agency in this state, Caltrans, and their approach to bike facilities as it relates to their freeway projects. I didn't get the chance to testify that Caltrans, I think, was very responsive in the Build NCC project, where they added the bike facilities from Birmingham down to across the lagoon and into Solana Beach. And there were some significant bike facilities that came from that freeway project. So that was good. But overall, there's a lot of question about the dollars that are going into widening freeways versus looking at ways to change, to shift modes. And the other thing, I saw a couple of presentations. One that interested me a whole lot was the slow street. There's some slow streets up in the Bay Area that have been very successful. They started during the pandemic, and maybe down the road a piece we'll have a little presentation on that. And there was also edge bike lanes, which are happening around the world, and to an extent here in the United States, and they may be facilities that would be appropriate for our city. We have a resident of Encinitas who has come on occasion to speak to us, Tom Berluti. Yep, and he was there giving some presentation. He's pretty experienced in these bike facility things. So that's it. City manager reports.
North County's hottest events are in Encinitas, and here's a couple of them that are coming up. Movie in the Park, Elemental, Saturday, May 4th, 6 p.m., Glen Park. You'll want to be there. Document shredding event. You have a document shredding event and other stuff that you can drop off. Computer and television monitors, printers and scanners, fax machines, VCRs, radios, cell phones, papers to shred. That is Saturday, May 18th, 9 to noon at City Hall. Don't miss it.
I wonder what the caffeine content of that Celsius drink is.
I think they like.
No, you just had to step up your game because you had some competition with your fellow city employees here for this video.
I know. Maybe I'll just start making videos.
I did have a request, city manager. A lot of my neighbors are starting to ask about when the sand replenishment project will conclude, and to get some dates around Stone Steps and Moonlight reopening.
Yes, I did send a note to our coastal administrator to get some information. I'll send that out, and we'll put something up on the website.
And one other question, Solana Recyclers recently said that no batteries for now. Does the recycling event on the 18th that you so perfectly explained, did it include battery recycling as an option?
It doesn't say, oh, yeah.
I think it does.
We will also be accepting household batteries and electronic waste. Thank you for
So
bringing
that's and I've heard that.
Even more exciting.
Yeah, it's even more, and there's quite a bit of comments on Nextdoor about what do I do with my batteries, even before the Solana recycling announcement.
Tarquin, can you bring that kind of energy to your city attorney report?
I was going to say that I don't think I can meet that level of enthusiasm as the city manager, therefore I will defer from giving a city attorney report this evening.
Okay. City clerk reports? No report. Nothing. Okay, with that we're adjourned. Thank you.